madness. This is
Trash Talk Tuesday.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, capsuleers and capsulettes. Welcome to Trash Talk Tuesday. I hope you guys enjoyed the intro. Did you guys see it? Did you like it?
I didn't see it.
You didn't
I'm
see it?
sorry.
Oh man. Well, that's the new Trash Talk Tuesday intro. I hope you
Describe
guys.
it for me.
So
Tell me all
basically,
about it.
you know, in the movie 300, when Leonidas kicks the man into the well and he says, "Madness." This
Yes.
is, well, instead of saying this is Sparta, he says this is Trash Talk Tuesday, and then he kicks the man into the well.
So you're implying that the viewers are being kicked into a well by listening to the show?
You know what? Yeah, I am.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Trash Talk Tuesday and the bottomless hole of death. Redline 13 is proud to present himself.
I don't think I've ever been prouder to present something that has been, created lovingly for content. Anyway, April Fools, guys, that's not the real Trash Talk Tuesday intro. And for anybody who really, really needs it, here you go.
1, 2, 3, Rain, talk to me. We're gonna hit a beat and talk about my Eve. Everybody don't know what I say. I'm gonna do a beat.
Make it stop, Rain.
it's time to stop.
Why did you?
Rock, paper, scissors, right? We don't want Eve to be as simple as shut the fuck up, Seto!
Floods of like memes, and these small gangers are like, we're the elite of the elite. Do not fuck with us. We will kill you. We are the best players ever. It's like, dude, I did your shit. I did it better than you did.
You know what this conversation is like? When I say not enough supers die in Dell, and people tell me, oh, look, there's a super died in Dell. So it's like, when
What
I'm
are you
talking
even
about the
talking
balance
about?
issue,
We were talking about fucking balance, not supers
Yeah.
dying in Delph.
Look,
Why
look,
does
look, look,
everything with you have to be about supers fucking dying in
Shut
Delph?
up! Shut up!
Christ!
It's an analogy, moron. It's an analogy. Okay?
You guys stop arguing. You act like a fucking married couple. Jesus Christ.
No, don't stop arguing.
It's an
Well, it
analogy.
is Trash Talk
Dan,
Tuesday.
I was like,
All right, now we're back. I played the real intro so that everybody could be happy for seeing the real intro. And welcome to Trash Talk Tuesday. My name is Redline 13. I'll be your host for this evening. I'm also joined by the other host with the most, Villy. Hello, Villy. How are you this evening?
Good evening. Welcome back.
Thank you. And we're also joined by Contan.
Yeah, what's up?
Hey, Contan. So this is Trash Talk Tuesday. It's just the three of us, just so that you know, as a viewer, anybody is welcome to join the Trash Talk Tuesday show at any point in time. There's a Discord that you can join, and you simply join the Drag Me channel, and then I'll drag you into the stream. Here's the Discord. If you want to come and talk, feel free to come and talk. So anyways, tonight's topics are, well, not really that plentiful. The main thing that I wanted to talk about is how everything that we talked about, a month or two ago, is happening. So, like, Villy, you mentioned a while back that Pureblind was going to be the hotbed for content coming up, and it turns out that it was, for what, like 2 weeks?
3, I think. 2, 3. Something like that, yeah.
3 weeks. So after 3 weeks of killing, like, the goons killed 3 keep stars, 4 keep stars.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 or 4 keep stars, something like that. Some
3 keep stars. FN, Roar, and 566.
Yeah, and for the last few weeks, there's just been bashing of heads against the X47 keep star. Which is
I mean, you could make a debatable case if there's even really that, because it's only getting shield reinforced at this point now, right? So.
Right. Yeah, I think the last number that I saw of times that it was reinforced was like 8 times, 9 times. It's reinforced right now, isn't it?
Yes.
It isn't reinforced right now. Yep.
So it's been reinforced anytime that it could be, and then the goon is not following up on the armor timer. And then everybody from the other side calls them cowards and losers. And then a couple days later, they don't follow up on something, and then the goons call them cowards and losers. And I just can't keep track anymore. Why is everybody
Mhm.
fighting this lopsided bullshit? Like, it's a primarily Euro time zone alliance versus primarily Chinese time zone alliance. Why is this war even happening? I'm confused.
People were bored. The number one reason that anything happens in this game. People were bored.
Yeah, but they're still bored. All anybody's doing is shield refs on a keep star, or I mean, there have been a few skirmishes in the last few days.
Well,
You
that's
were
because nobody wanted to be aggressive enough to really do it in an interesting way, I guess would be the way to say it. This would certainly be interesting if, enemies had, did those keep stars, then redeployed to like Tazy or somewhere like that and like changed the dynamic, or switch sided over towards Vale, maybe went after like some of the Lowsec keeps. Like there's a ton of different ways you could play this out, but the way they've chosen to play it is that they're gonna sit in Declan, and yeah, that's yeah. I mean, there's only so much they can do, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm still a believer that they'll find a way to break the X47 keep, but after that, it will be. I would be amazed if they then begin to attempt to do the UMI keep star, right? So that would pretty much be the end of it, which is kind of disappointing, I guess.
yeah, well, and I forget who it was, but I believe X47 is the end of the campaign for them. If they kill that, it's done.
That was me who said that last week. And then a couple days ago on the fireside, the same question was asked, and Asher reiterated that exact thing. So yeah, it's still basically the plan as far as I can tell.
All right. So bash head against Keepstar until Keepstar dies. But let me back it up a little bit because that's not really what you're doing, is it? You're reinforcing the Keepstar, and let me get Securitas in here. I'm going to, Johnny. I'm going to. So you're reinforcing the Keepstar, and the thing is that you're saying, like, well, not you, but you guys are saying you guys have to form for every timer, all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the mentality right now, right? You're trying to wear them down, or am I missing something?
I think the mentality is they're looking for a good combination of timer and day, right? To go for it.
Well, I don't know how there could have been a better combination of timer and day than the first one that was on like a Saturday, and it was like a huge fight, but there was no big commit from the goon side to actually take it down.
I mean, I think you can make the argument that they felt they were not ready at that point. They hadn't set up their siege forts, and
Wasn't
obviously,
that wasn't that when all the other keeps died as well though?
Yes,
no,
it was. It was when
Hey
all the other
guys,
keeps died. Hey, Zach, how's it going?
good. How are you? I
no,
just
there
got
was
home
another
from work.
time in the middle of that. I think you're misremembering a little bit.
But that was in the cluster of Keepstar deaths. X47 was one of them. There's a big, huge fight, but you guys didn't commit the big guns because why?
Mm.
Right.
There
Who
was an
knows?
attempt to do the subcap thing, and then the timer kind of, you know, didn't go in fast enough, and then it was just like, okay, well, I guess we'll just take all the other keeps then, and the forts and such. And since then, it's just been timer games, I think. Pretty much it. It's pretty boring.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did warn Darkshines that exactly this scenario would happen before it happened.
You did. You really did. You came on this show and you said very simply, if you guys deploy, you're going to kill the content. And then they deployed and they killed the content.
I went a step further. I don't know if you remember, Redline. I actually said the non-Sino jammed Keepstars will probably die, and then like after that, it will probably be a stalemate for an indefinite period, which is pretty much what's happened.
So how
Yeah,
long
I
do
think
you
the
think
only
it would
interesting
stay?
thing that people are really contesting with is it will X47 die or not, right? Because it's
Yes, that is the question. I think probably more than X47 would be a lot to hope for Imperium, but the question is, do they get X47 or not? I think that's where there's still some play in that right now.
yeah.
I think the
Actually, they have
longer
to.
time goes on, the less likely it is. Like they're kind of the numbers are going down. People get tired of these deployments fairly quickly. So if they're gonna do it, I don't know. It would probably be pretty soon, I'd imagine.
So how long do you think they have left in them?
That's always tough to say. I mean, it kind of depends on like, if I like go and like, feed them 100 billion-ish worth of dreads tomorrow, it probably extends the time considerably, right? But kind of depends on how things go. I would say like right now it already looks kind of tenuous. So like if it goes too much past another week or two, like I think it would be challenging unless something injected new life into the deployment.
When did the siege forts go down? What day was that?
It was like a week ago or something, wasn't it? Or more? It was
I
a
don't
while
really
ago.
remember.
It was on a Wednesday.
Um,
Was it last Wednesday or was it the one before that?
I
I think it
don't.
was last Wednesday, maybe.
Hold on, there's a really bad Reddit post about it. We'll see how many days ago
I think
it
it was
was.
last Wednesday. I think, but I
I
don't know.
just
It could have
remember
been
the
the one
numbers
before
being
that.
pretty decent. That's all.
Yeah, no, I mean the goon numbers were decent in EU, but that doesn't really matter. Like the only numbers that matter are Chinese time zone.
Well, and that was kind of why I was asking why this kind of war would even really be happening, because I get that. I mean, they want to go after fraternity because they want to go after uh, the biggest fish, I guess, because fraternity is a pretty big fish at the moment that they can reach, anyways. But it
And they're
just
kind of
seems
untried as well, right? Nobody's tried to invade them for a long, long time, right? So you don't really know what the capabilities are.
yeah. But the last time someone really did try, it was Test, and they won. Like they
Yeah.
alarm clocked enough to be able to actually win this the war.
To be fair,
Also,
fraternity was half the size back then, and Test was like very powerful, relatively speaking, at the time to right now.
right,
And also, I think Frat didn't really have the supers and the Titans that they do now, and the years of wealth generation. So it's a very I talked with a lot of people who were involved in that campaign, and they said it was barely possible even then, and like they were having to like alarm clock. It was apparently quite brutal. Apparently the fights were pretty fun, but it was like a pretty brutal campaign, and it really took every ounce of effort. And Frat was much weaker back then. Of course, the Imperium is stronger than Test was at the time, so I mean that does help. But and they have
right.
B3 too, but it was apparently not easy.
Can confirm.
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah,
that
Billy
was
was there.
you and Seto and all those guys doing that for every
Paperback.
morning for like months. That kind of
Yeah,
dedication.
I mean, the reality is in those kind of wars, I remember we had like some random Titan jumped to a Sino, which caused a dread fight, which we managed to win somehow, and then that ended up somehow becoming the biggest win of the fucking campaign because it ended up getting us a hole in the Sino jammer wall because some random system in the back end was open at that same point, and like the way in which that campaign worked was very unique because it was just us plugging away day in day out trying to get iHub timers so that we could find a way through the Sino jammer wall, and then
That was
eventually we got one.
BOZ1, wasn't it? I think
Say
I'm
that.
pretty sure it was BOZ1 where everyone just got distracted by killing this Titan rather than running the iHub event.
Yeah, something like that. And then BOZ1 became our kind of mini foothold, I guess you could call it, and that allowed us to get deeper into like. Then we ended up getting like 4 or 5, 6 systems, and bit by bit we started to be able to unravel the knot from there. And then we got lucky with a couple random kind of events, and it becomes one of those things where you have to have like the stamina to really exist on that front line 24/7 for forever, basically, to a degree, right? So and that this was in the middle of the Rorqual era when people could mine, a couple billion Iskin a night pretty easy, right? So it was a very different meta dynamic as well, where the money just didn't matter near as much as it does now.
Someone made an interesting point in the chat, I think, Redline. The question should be how long can Horde stay in the deployment? They're facing the same problem as Goons. So Horde is not deployed at the moment, FYI.
Horde's not in the deployment.
My SIG is deployed, but I don't know how much that we've been continuous deployed somewhere for about a year so far. We haven't ever gone home, so hopefully we can make it another month or two.
Yeah, much like Old Test, Horde maintains basically what is kind of like an active PvP core that's always deployed somewhere, always doing something. And those people generally don't need to generate money because they've got a certain level of individual wealth, and at the same time, they're also in a situation where they play the game to just PvP, so they're always going to want to be deployed, right? So it creates this dynamic where you have these PvPers that are always out there, and they don't undeploy, they just exist, right?
We've got a whole sig of contans.
Wow, they're the biggest problem with that kind of group is you build up too many ships in your deployment location, and then you have to figure out a way to get them all shipped to the next one, and that is a very real problem.
And see, in the contrast, goons have deployed everybody, even the crabs, the ones that don't really want to PvP all that much, and those people are starting to leave the area. They're either like jump cloning back home to go mining, or just not showing up for fleets. It's interesting, but there's still been some fights though. I'm not sure why the fighting would need to stop. I mean, there was this.
Well, the funny thing is, as the
fun-
numbers go down, the likelihood of fights goes up, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah,
So
so
the more people in theater, the less likely to forget fights. The more people in theater, or I fucking said that wrong. The less people in theater, the more likely you get fights. The more people in theater, the less likely you get fights. So as you know, initiative and goons bit by bit slowly move back home or undeploy or just choose to do other things with their time, that means there's less people in theater. The numbers get closer and closer to even, which means there's a higher probability of people being willing to take fights that are not, insanely lopsided.
yeah, and
Yeah,
just like
especially
here's a
because the
few days ago.
whole like all the fights pretty much have happened within direct Titan bridge range of goon staging. So for a fight to happen there, like it can't escalate too quickly or too, like the numbers have to be fairly constant. Otherwise, it's very difficult to take those kind of fights unless you can really like touch and go. So basically, like as that has slowly happened, we've been able to fight more. So I would anticipate the people who remain up here will get to on both sides will get to enjoy more content the less serious the deployment is, kind of paradoxically.
Well, and like I guess Hashu is what we'll call this person, Hashu Wadley. Basically saying that Frat is relying on your sig though to stay afloat, basically.
I don't think so. I think we provide a lot of value. Like any gang that goes through us, like we kill a lot of the flycatchers or like Arcadios's gangs, or like we provide value, but like like in terms of raw numbers in Chinese time zone, like my sig is not very large, so like I don't think that we would necessarily change the tide or anything like that. Like I think definitely they get their money's worth from us, but I don't think that we're indispensable.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand as well that like in Chinese time zone, 50 people isn't going to make the difference. Like it just isn't, right? Uh, but there's no doubt that there's value being provided when you have. It creates a situation where during Euro time zone, people can't just kind of walk around and do stuff for free as much as they might otherwise be able to. But that's always been true to a degree, right? Like if you have, there's nothing wrong with having some value, and I think that's a good thing. And that it keeps
You guys' harpies have been very, very, very effective.
We don't have harpies.
Isn't that
actually.
you guys? I thought it was you guys running the harpies.
That's Zigam, I think. Zigam comes by in harpy sometimes.
He's been
There's a
very,
lot of,
very
like, random-
successful.
I mean, because like nothing's happening in the drone regions, right? So like all the fleets that form, they just fly, either to like up here or down to Delve or something like that. So I mean, there's lots of like random roaming gangs that come through from Horde. But like honestly, I think goons have better intel about them because like we'll be like watching someone or about to try to fight a goon fleet or something, and then someone will be like, oh, there's like 80 horde harpies here, and like that's the first that I've heard of it. Like the goons actually probably have better intel on those people than us because it's just random people deciding to go take a roam out or something. So
They've actually, well, that's funny because they've made the difference several times.
Yeah, no,
Like, yeah.
like usually when I see them, I like message them like, oh hey, let's like work together. But like usually goons have spotted them long before I'm aware that they're there, so it's kind of funny.
That is funny. I mean, like I said, they've been effective in so much as exactly what you said. Oh, there's 80 harpies coming. We're gonna go ahead and wait, or we stand down, or whatever. We
Yeah, or they go
They're
like
funny.
shoot something and like people chase them, and like I've gotten like some I've got caught B3 a few times when they try to like chase Zig him around and stuff. Like, but for the most part, it's like not super intentional the way that that all comes together.
Intentional or not, your Sig comes in like the fucking Kool-Aid man.
Well, like that's the kind of stuff that I've always enjoyed. But I don't have
From
any
my standpoint,
illusions.
there's been a lot of fun in the small gang stuff. I mean, the big gang stuff's happening too, but I've had more fun in the smaller groups that have gone out and just kind of, like you said, roamed around and
Well, and I
chased each
prefer
other.
that too, because the game just doesn't work if you get too many people. Like, I don't know if you guys remember the fight in, was it 5ZXX or JC? No, it wasn't JC. I don't think they had a Keepstar there. One of the Keepstar fights, just like the only people that got any kills were like the TFIs on both sides. I think Imperium had significantly more TFIs, Imperium and B3, so we just basically lost that. But like nobody else killed anything. Like the Lashaks didn't kill anything, the Paladins didn't kill anything, because it would only let you fire once. And that was actually new. I mean, I played a lot in Severe Tie-Dye. I have never seen that before, and I actually haven't seen it since. Although we haven't had a huge tie-dye fight since then. But
That was
like,
Was that before or after the node broke?
no, that was a different one.
This
That
was in 5ZXX.
This was in
during-
5ZXX.
5ZXX,
Like,
okay, right.
like the weird thing was the game actually felt pretty fluid. Like everything worked. Like you could double click around and like move around and stuff. But like the guns would just fire once and then they wouldn't fire again. And for a doctrine like Paladins, where you're like relying on DPS more than anything, like it doesn't work if if you only fire once. So
Yeah, sustained DPS as opposed to an alpha strike. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So like, I actually don't enjoy those fights, and that's one of the reasons I want the goon deployment to end is I want to get back to like a smaller scale of fight. Like I want everyone to chill out, and I want frat to kind of go home, and I want goons to go home, and I want it to kind of get to a smaller scale. So that's my personal motivation for trying to end this deployment as quickly as possible, because I prefer the smaller scale of the fights, and like whenever there's like two coalitions right next to each other, it's really, really hard to get that.
Let
Small
alone,
scale
let
would
alone
be-
3 coalitions right next to each other. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. Actually, it's 3, isn't it? I always forget that they're all like one big mega, like B3 and Fire are one big mega coalition. Then there's goons, and then there's basically frat and us kind of. So it's more like 3, I guess. But it's very hard to have small scale mediums. I would say I prefer medium scale maybe, but it's very hard to have that kind of content when there's
It
this
is, because as soon as a medium scale engagement begins, people start piling in, and it'll quickly become a large scale engagement. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the nature of the beast when, like you said, when you got those big groups so close
When
to each
everyone's in
other.
jump
Yeah,
range of each other too, so it's
for
like
sure. Yeah.
So I don't know.
I like them both. I prefer the medium to small, but bigs are fun too. I don't know. I have a hard time paying attention, so tie-dye helps me.
Yeah, that's true.
It's actually funny because, and I mean this in a way not meant to insult you, but like Tie-Dye actually makes Eve a lot easier for less capable players. It removes a lot of the skill expression in the game where
I agree.
people are trying to multi-box and do all these other it just allows people to get away with a lot of things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to get away with, which is
Little errors don't matter. I mean, big errors still matter. Big errors are big errors, right? But little, like you said, the little stuff that like the F1 pilots can make a mistake and it won't be detrimental. I mean, it'll be detrimental, but it won't be catastrophic, right? Yeah.
there's lots of time to correct though.
Yeah, correct. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
My computer just stops working when there's high tie-dye.
Yeah, I don't like, I always feel like there's a lot of external factors that take a lot of like the sort of skill of Eve out of the high tie-dye fights, and like a lot of it just becomes out of your control, or it becomes, and that happened to goons as well, right? Like they had that moment where they teleported back onto the Keepstar, and like they couldn't do anything. Like, it wasn't like because they played badly or anything, they just got screwed because that's how the server rolled, and like that just happens in tie-dye, and that's kind of one of the bad parts about it. And someone made the point in chat, kind of made the point that that's when you get to use the biggest and most exciting weapons. I guess I have a different perspective than most of the bigger block people. I actually hate supers and titans. I honestly wish they would just remove them from the game, put a titan bridge on something else so that you still have that functionality, and just make it a game of dreads and carriers and subcaps online. I think that would be way better for the game, but that's just me. So I actually don't like tie-dye because of that. I think like the risks involved in doing it are so large that like people just avoid it. So like the super fleets are almost more for show and intimidation most of the time rather than actual fighting, because a big loss, as we saw in M2, is so catastrophic that it can change the course of the war, or at least impact it to a significant degree. And so people just avoid it. And like you need to be able to commit to be on for 12 to 14 to 20 hours, and it goes till, there's just like a lot of problems with that. And so I think if those ships just didn't exist and it was just dreads, like it's much easier to stomach losing a lot of dreads, even if it's on paper, it's a lot of ISK. And they just get used a lot more, I think, if there were no Titans.
It would be interesting to see how different a big fight would be if it was battleships with the biggest ship on the field. Not a capital out there, no fighters, like no heavy fighters or whatever.
Well, I think you need to have
how many more
dreads
people
still.
you could have there though?
No, I think
Or
dreads
even
are still
dreads would be
important,
fine.
because
Yeah.
otherwise facts just become too oppressive. Like yes, if you have a huge Lowsec fleet, you probably just kill the facts, but facts are just really oppressive if you don't have dreads. And so it's kind of like balance though, because like dreads are actually very good game design because they siege, they can't move, they can't like untackle themselves. So like they kind of depend on subcaps in a way. And then like, the whole subcaps, carriers, facts, dread ecosystem is actually very well balanced. It's surprisingly well balanced for CCP. Where it really gets fucked up is when you start adding Titans and Supers in, where you can just drop Titans 180 kilometers off and just it doesn't matter what your dreads do or carry, you just die. Like there's nothing you can do about it. And like the Titan meta is just in the end mostly about who just has more of them. And so, or who can abuse tether or whatever. So it's a very uninteresting meta when you add that. If you actually go back to dreads, carriers, subcaps, and facts, there's a lot of counterplay in there. You can fit long range dreads, short range dreads. You can, drop carriers at range. You can use facts. You can kill facts. I mean, there's like a lot of sort of, there's a lot more ways that you can counterplay. You can defang fighters. There's no way to like defang a DD other than killing the Titan. So
Oh, let's see here. On that particular subject, are you afraid with CCP's proposed changes to lowering the cost of capitals that it could prevent capital fights from occurring simply because people are afraid that if they lose it and then go to replace it, that somebody's not going to sell it to them because of the lower price? And then ultimately it's a plus because you'll get more people into capitals because they can more easily afford them.
I think capitals are actually in a really good place right now. Like I think dreads should probably be a little cheaper. I like the fact that carriers are expensive. They really should be. And I like the fact that facts are expensive. I think dreads could probably be a little cheaper. I don't think that like, I think getting rid of supers and titans and having cheap dreads is a really nice thing.
But that's okay. But that's not really realistic, right? That's probably not going to happen.
No.
So do you think the prices of supers and titans are where they should be right now?
I mean, I would like, because I hate them. I would rather they're just like they don't get used and they're too expensive to use.
Well, that's what I'm
Like,
saying. Because right now, I
can't
would say
really
titans
be
are almost too
enough
expensive
for
to
me.
use. I mean, for
The
a lot
only
of groups,
reason
right?
I still like Titans is that I think the bridge mechanic is obviously good. Like you can't always be gating around everywhere. I think the bridge mechanic is good, so that should be preserved. But I've never found that type of gameplay particularly interesting. I'm sure
I
there's
personally
counterpoint.
think Titan Super Price is probably where it should be.
That's okay. I agree with you, Billy. I think so too. Because they are so powerful, right? They should be an enormous cost to you.
Well,
to have
I
it,
don't
right?
think we need
Well,
to
then
see a situation
should-
where there's 1,000 Titans again in this game.
I agree. Yeah, no, I
They
agree.
should
See, them
also
being
increase the
expensive.
Don't take
size of
mine
keep
away, though.
stars, though.
See, if they exist, the problem with them being expensive is that means that the people who already have them basically maintain an advantage. So that's like, I like the fact that they're expensive because they don't have too much of an impact on most day-to-day fights. Like for that reason, I like it. But the side effect of that is that it means that the people who already have a lot of Titans get to enjoy this massive gap where nobody will catch up with them, right? And that's kind of why I like a dread-based meta, because any group probably can catch up in getting their pilots and dreads. And then the balance around dreads, if everyone is fit equally and has equal skill, is mostly like how many people do you have, and that's basically how well can you motivate your pilots and stuff like that to show up, which is a better metric than how long has your alliance been in the game and allowed to accumulate Rorqual goo before it got nerfed, right? So
Well, I
that's
mean
a
that's
better.
true to a degree, but I mean, as we can see, I mean, even with the Goon deployment, right? Like a lot of those people who had Supers and Titans don't keep playing the game forever, right? Like they do
Sure.
stop, and like I absolutely will not deny that there is a legacy wealth kind of problem, but and as a CSM, I recommended multiple times to have natural upkeep on Titans.
But that wealth
But
disparity with Titans has been a thing forever, right? Even when there's only a few of them in the game, only a few people had that extra power, right? So there's always been that gap. It just never really closed over the course of time, right? It just became bigger numbers, but the same groups basically have always had the advantage from the very beginning. So
Well, it's like super carriers. They used to be 6 bill a piece, and now they're like 25 bill just for a hull.
I don't think they were 5-6 bill a piece,
10, weren't
even
they?
in 1DQ. But
The
like,
cheapest I ever saw was like I think Goons were selling them for like 7 or 8 or something like that at one
yeah,
point. I think I saw them in like routinely for sale. You could get them for like 10 or 11 pretty easily, but they were very cheap at one
Yeah.
point.
That's what I bought my Super for was 10. But I think that might have been fit though.
All I know is every time I save up the is to buy a fucking super, the game seems to just say, "Oh no, not today."
No, it's part of this game though. That happened to me with Jump Freighter. Jump Freighter was steady at 5 billion for the longest time. Longest time. When I finally got a 5 billion saved up, it jumped to 6 billion. I was like, "You motherfuckers." I mean, it's always been a thing in this game. I don't know.
I mean, it's funny because, but many people don't remember, but Titan prices have actually fluctuated heavily over the years, right? Like they actually were when I bought my first Titan in 2008, 9, or whatever. It was like 40 bill, and then they went up to like 100 bill, and then they went down to 40 bill, right? Like there is absolutely market corrections, but
But in 2008, 40 bill
was a lot more than it
was
is
a
now, for
lot more
sure.
than it is today, right? Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah, I got mine for 35, but that was kind of I got really lucky.
Yeah, it's just
Do you think there
Okay.
should be like any kind of like increase to like the cost of say like a keep star or something like that? Because someone brought up in the chat that it's like vastly more expensive to have a Titan than have the structure
Yeah.
to put them
The
in.
price of keep stars should basically double, if not triple, in my opinion.
What is the average price right now? Is it about
Like
170? 160, okay. All right.
160 to 180, somewhere in that zone.
They are very cheap for what they offer. I don't know. It's one of
Yeah.
those tough things because like if you're big, doubling the price, they're still probably affordable if you're like a big alliance or a big group. If you're like, you know, a smaller group, the tough part is like while I hate super caps, they're still part of the game and like smaller groups need to have them. But then like if you make them too expensive, then like smaller groups just can't have keep stars at all because,
I don't
you
think that's
know,
true. In smaller groups, you always have people who have 500
sure,
that are
but like
hiding in the wings.
yeah, but you don't want to shell out for a structure like that. Like that, if they're that expensive, it paints like they're already a pretty big target on your
No,
back to have a keep star outside of a coalition. But if you have one that costs like 300 bill, that's a pretty,
I think it's important to understand that one of the biggest problems with Eve is we've removed a lot of the big challenges, the big goals, etc. for groups.
Yes.
So nowadays, group gets a keep star. It's like, oh wow, keep star. Never seen that before, right? But like, it used to be when a group dropped a station or a Fortizar. In some
but the
cases,
stations couldn't die though.
they absolutely
The 8
could.
could, yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, they flipped. The
No,
stations
the
split
8 could
side.
die.
Yeah, the very first op I did was in fucking Aquarius.
Yeah, well, the egg usually didn't die though. Like
It
very-
absolutely
Oh,
did
yeah, it
many
did.
times.
died a
Like,
handful, like compared to the amount of stations there were, it was very rare. I remember being on
especially
one.
early on, a lot of eggs died.
Sure, but like generally speaking, like they were permanent assets.
But it was a
Uh,
big deal to drop an egg. Like when Severance did
It
it,
was.
it was everyone was there because we were not only were guarding it, we were proud of the moment, right? It was a big event. Like I said, that was a big event. Yeah, and
Yeah, and it brought your alliance together. It was something you guys kind of rallied and unified around because you knew it was a big event, because you knew it mattered, right?
yes,
So,
exactly. Yep.
and nowadays it's like somebody just throws down a keep star and like, do you even form up? Like, well, no hostiles, we don't have to, right? Like, there's there's just no. I don't know how to put this
I
properly.
know a corporation of 20 people that has a keep star sitting in a hangar somewhere, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
how not a big event they are. Yeah, yeah.
Like they just they're just very blah, and part of that is the price, and obviously part of that is their commonness. But if we don't at some point set the price a little more correctly, then they will forever be just what they are now, which is just a bigger Fortizar, right?
And I'm gonna take some not my personal, I didn't personally cause this, but the group I'm in kind of caused this, right? 1DQ fucked things up, right? I guarantee CCP never expected that to happen like it did, like with the structure wise, right? And I don't think it should be like that. I like taking advantage of it, don't get me wrong, but that really was detrimental to the entire structure meta in the whole game, right? It was because people are now that's kind of not the goal necessarily, but it is, right? That's you can get something like that, you're set.
Well, it's like just about every other system Frat has, they have a keep star in it. Like even if there's nobody there, they have keep stars everywhere. I would bet they have more keep stars in Frat than anywhere.
No, it's not quite that bad. Like we don't have as many as Goons had.
Yeah, Frat is not as bad as Old Delve. Like
There's a lot though.
yeah,
Oh,
there's
Delve
definitely
was
more than
crazy,
a few.
right? Yeah.
Many, though.
But like Old Delve was literally what 60 something keep stars out of like
66 or 68? Yeah.
yeah, no, it was like 60. It was 59 if I remember correctly.
I thought we got to 60. I thought it was 66. I thought
Whatever.
maybe not.
But like quite literally every second system in Delve used to have a keep star, right?
If not, and Fountain, almost all of them. Like many.
No,
in
there was
Fountain.
only 6 in Fountain.
Was there?
Yeah.
Seems like
Well,
there was more
Initiative's
than
4, right? So like they can't be like the Richie Rich Goons. So there was only 6 in Fountain. I remember that one pretty conclusively.
No,
I
seems like
can
there's
probably
more.
remember them all too.
It feels like there was
J5A,
more of them.
B1.
Yeah, I was there for J5A because I was in like Legion.
Yeah, CTEC-N, KVN.
The one in
The
Is there
regional.
one in 6 VDT?
Bastions and
No, I don't
B.
think so.
What was it? What were you in? I can't remember what system that was.
Anyways, like I'm sure somebody can look it up, but I'm
Yeah,
like
it's not that
90%
important.
sure
Yeah,
it was
I
6.
believe you. I don't keep track. It seemed like a lot of them, but
I just wish there were more diversity in the structures. Like back in the day, I'm sure you all remember the old, what are now the faction Fortizars, and then there was like 10 different ones you could do, and they were all different types. And I mean, these just look so plain Jane, common. Like it's like when you go into a
Oh,
new neighborhood.
1,000%. I think you're correct. I think it would be super awesome if we could add like a combat Fortizar, and we could add like like I don't know if anybody remembers Battlestar Galactica, but like just a clone fucking ship, like or a clone base, like um one would be like a defensive style Fortizar. We could add like an actual research station for like researching industrial wise, like a recon base or something that could have
Yeah.
like a permanent like mobile observatory. Like there's all kinds of structures you could put up in system with unique effects that would not fundamentally cause game breaking problems, right?
I wish we could go back to being able to attack services. That was one of the best things about stations, I thought.
Well, it's like the old POSs, the old POS towers we used to have back in the day. Everybody could take a POS, you could set it up. They were always different. You could have different gun assortments, different attachments. It was the same stick in space with a shield on it, but each one was different. You
Yeah,
couldn't.
how you put your guns up, and yeah, exactly. It was. I mean, there were a lot of the same because there was certain ways that just were better. But you're right, you could make it a little different. I used to be able to knock out the repair service. You'd be able to knock out. I don't know why that went away with keep stars. I think that it should be a thing.
To be fair, with the advent of super capital damage, it would not be a good mechanic because it used to be you had to repair those services, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So the amount of damage that traditionally groups could put out would not equal. Like it was a bad mechanic overall, even though like you guys remember it fondly because it was time zone centric, right? So
Sure, yeah, yep.
you'd have a group like goons that come in to reinforce all the services, and then Frat every morning would have to repair them, and you're like, well, maybe that's right, but it's like they have no real counterplay. it just creates a nuisance.
I guess I liked it because it was something smaller to medium groups could do, and and
Yeah, and I don't disagree. It's just
I
I
see your
think in
point
the
though.
scheme
Yeah.
of larger warfare, it fails with the current way the current game works. I think it was much more strong when the groups were smaller and the damage was not as insane as it perhaps it is now.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, I suppose if they did it, they'd have to put like a severe damage cap on it. I don't know. It just didn't work. Right. Reminiscing about the old days. I'm gonna. Yeah.
Yeah, back when it was 3 times the amount of players we had now, there were more small groups and medium-sized groups than there are now, and it's not like it is now where everybody has to pick a side.
You know what? I still have as much
Don't-
fun today as I did in
Don't
2010.
don't talk about there being more small groups now when you're in one of the largest coalitions in the game.
We said then there was more small groups. Not now.
Yeah, then.
I know, but I'm
Right.
saying
His
you
point
have
is
the
like,
ability to make smaller groups by making smaller groups. Like
You
if
make
you
you
want
only
that,
make
if you
small
want that
groups
back,
by
get it back.
you only make small groups nowadays by creating 6. That's the only way.
That's actually true in a way. I will say though, I do feel like Eve has been on a bit of a rebound lately. Like the numbers have picked up. Like people seem to be more engaged with the game. Um, I've always hated the people who like sit around in discords and complain about Eve, yet continue to float around and like not play the game and just complain about it and stuff like that. And I do feel like there's been a little less of that recently. And the player count seems to have rebounded some way. It was down pretty far at one point, but it's a little bit better lately. I feel like, I don't know if that's borne out by the evidence, but it certainly
You
feels
gotta
that way.
you gotta admit the war plays a major part in that. If there wasn't an active war going on between multiple parties, then the numbers would still be consistent.
I'm not
I
so
don't know if I
sure
agree
it
with
is.
that
There's a
either,
lot
yeah.
of people in Lowsec right now doing faction warfare and stuff, and there's a lot of people in the New South. Like there's just so many fights going on down there.
I don't think the war is actually contributing that much, if at all, to the.
I think the
because
people,
it's only
because
this
those
is
for a
people
not
few
would still be
minutes.
playing, right?
It's
This
only
is
for a
not a
few
very active
hours.
war, right? Like,
Yeah, it's only
So
for a few
here's-
hours, like every couple days,
I
that
put it
there's
on
like
the
a lot.
screen. The
There you go, Skyhawk. Thank you.
PCU, I think is what they call that. So there has been an increase recently, small one, but it's there, a couple hundred.
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like CCP
well,
could
can
do a
you
lot
set this over
more.
6 months instead of like?
The whole entire
So,
life of Eve.
so
For sure,
paradoxically,
that was 36 hours, but
Yeah, so
yeah.
36 hours, perhaps not.
So you can
perfectly
see it's
true.
representative.
You're right.
it's
You're right.
it
My
kind
bad.
of it kind of went up from and it's
So yeah,
stayed
6 months to a
stable.
year, I think, is the category you probably want to look at. And
So I feel like paradoxically, if they nerfed like the power projection of the big blocks, which have a lot of the players, you would actually see more people play the game because you could carve out your own little space from these big groups on their borders or on the edge and like kind of take your own little stuff, and then like more people would play. Like the more smaller groups there are, it is a good thing. And I'm not saying that, like I'm well aware that I'm in Horde, so I'm not saying that like
I mean, I'm in a small group. I get it. It makes sense.
but what I'm saying
Small
is
group.
I would like to nerf our power projection as well because like, we can get to Innsmother like, that, but we probably shouldn't be able to. And like as much as I like what's happening in the New South by the agreement, it shouldn't take an agreement for that kind of thing to be possible. It should just be too much work and too much hassle for us to go and take space. And that's why people should be able to live there, because we cannot, without expending massive amounts of effort and deploying, we cannot take it away from them. That's how it should be, but it's not like that right now. And I think actually a lot more people would play the game if that was the case. Like, you could start your own group without worrying about getting bullied out or having to make, kowtow to other people and stuff. I hope CCP listens, because it seems like the consensus has really gelled around nerfing Ansiblexes lately. Like I rarely hear people who disagree with it anymore. And so I'm hoping that they do that. I know we're kind of sidetracking, but it's kind of good that we mention this every show just so that CCP, I don't know if CCP listens, but it stays in the conversation that this needs to happen.
I think there's absolute proof they do listen to the players and the CSM because they've made changes to some of the, anytime they backpedal something, that's because they listened. I think they do listen to us. I mean, not everything. They're not going to listen to everything we say, but I think they do listen to players. Whether they react to it quickly or not, it's a different story. But I do think they listen. Billy, do you feel that way or no?
Sometimes.
Okay, but sometimes, yeah. I'm not saying every time, but they do sometimes listen. All right.
Well, in a way, if you look at it, ANSIs are a current game form replacement of, I'm sure we all remember the old days where capitals, you could move halfway across Eve in the span of 5 minutes. Now it takes you like 3 days with the cooldown and crap. So it's like, that's what ANSIs have become. They're the capital sinos all the way across.
Right.
I mean,
You
to a degree,
know,
yeah. And unfortunately, when you could move caps all the way across the galaxy in 10 minutes, that was a problem, right?
It was a problem. The thing with that was, it was only certain groups could do it. And to be fair, right? I mean, everybody could, but only a few groups did. Now with the ANSIs, pretty much anyone can, right?
right.
With this, if the instructors, if you have access to that infrastructure, it doesn't matter if you're a Titan pilot group or interceptors. You can move everything across with those. So it's changed that, not necessarily for the better, in my opinion.
Right. And one thing that they did do recently that I really agreed with was the faction battleship changes. That those were very welcome. The one thing that's missing from the battleship meta right now is there's not a reason to fly T1 battleships, and I think that there needs to be. So I agree that the factions are like faction battleships, just bang for buck, are really in a good place right now, especially the TFI. I feel like the TFI probably needs a little bit of an adjustment because it's like by far the best faction battleship. But other than that, I think they did a really good job. But what I do think is there needs to be a reason to fly T1 battleships. Like right now, you fit a T1 battleships, it's 450 mil. You fit a TFI, it's 700. But the TFI has like 100k more EHP, has better volley, like more slots, and there's not a reason to fly the T1 ones. So I do think they should probably either make them cheaper or something.
I
I
think a
don't think.
mix of both would be good. Like maybe take 20 or 30 mil in terms of materials off of them, and at the same time give them a couple extra uh, EHP, and then at the same time maybe bump one of their bonuses by a quarter. So a lot
Some
of
of
you have
them
like a
really need, yeah.
7.5% bonuses, make that a 10% bonus, right?
Some
And
of
that
them
all of a
really
sudden becomes
need
very strong.
like a bit of a bonus mix up. Some of them just are not in a like some of them are not really used. Some of them need a bit more grid, or there's like
Yep, 100%. Honestly, fitting constraints like CPU or grid are often like the biggest reasons why a ship like, for example, the Abaddon or the Apocalypse are just so
or they should
weak.
skew it so that T1 battleships actually do more damage than the faction ones, and the factions have a role of being like tanky brawlers, but like maybe the damage bonuses on the T1 are considerably higher, so you can kind of like gank with them a little bit better. I don't know, they could do stuff like that, but there's just not a reason to use them. Like you can either use Marauders, pirate battleships, or faction battleships, but almost nobody right now is using T1 battleships, and
It also
it's
doesn't
a
help that
shame.
T2 guns are like through the roof in terms of price right now, like 8 or 9 mil or whatever it is for a Tachyon 2, right? Times 8, or it just the price differential when 100 mil of your when your fit costs 100 mil, if your initial battleship is 300 mil or 700 mil, it still adds 100 mil, right? So, but that price percentage is relative. So
Yeah, like you know, like a group like Brave, for example, should have a reason. Like, let's say that their finances are kind of tight. Instead of feeling like they have to either pick hacks or like if they, whelp a bunch of TFIs, it's a big problem. Like a group like Brave should have a reason to use T1 battleships, and it should be scary. Like if they use a bunch of them, you should be like, well, I might win the fight, but I'm going to take a lot of losses because like the way T1 battleships are, they're going to like punch a hole through me or something. It should be kind of scary. But right now, if people show up with T1 battleships, you're like, oh, they're not serious about this.
I don't know. I
Um,
feel like Tempest are definitely still strong enough to be scary.
yeah.
And
The
if anybody
Tempest is
else
a,
is
a
in,
good example of like maybe one of them that is less like garbage
nobody's
than the
really
other
using them
ones.
right now, but Maelstroms would be very strong in a faction battleship meta for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and
problem is
much
like so much
much
revolves around eating shit to caps and stuff as well. And
yeah. I
Maelstroms
mean
have a
that's
big
always true
sig
though.
and low HP, so.
Back, sorry.
I mean, that's always true, but you get
The
those giant
Abaddon, I
alpha
feel like, is
platforms.
not a bad place. If they made the cap less terrible on the Abaddon, like there's no reason for it to be so bad. Like the Abaddon is actually one of the few where like you could maybe make it work. It just has a lot of damage and a lot of tank, but the cap is so bad that
Well,
it's
and the
like,
grid problems are the other big thing, right?
well, you can kind of get around those, but like overall,
Well, if you have to fit an RCU, it means you're losing a low slot, which means you're losing a ton of your fucking tank possibilities. So
and I do feel like CCP should be rewarding brawling in battleships. Like the difference between blasters should be like just like giga strong at close range, and they're like barely better than autocannons for DPS. Like it would, it'd be kind of interesting if like Megathrons did 1500 DPS or something. Like I'm sure there's ways to fuck up the balance with that, but there's definitely things they could do to make.
Wasn't there a time that they did fuck that up, where blasters were just outrageously powerful?
Like way back in the
I
beginning.
mean, it was a
of the
long time ago,
thing.
right? Yeah, I
It
do
was a
remember
long
that.
time
Yeah,
ago. But like you could do a lot, like because the range is so bad, it kind of self balances. Like
yeah,
I've
if you
always
have to
liked
be
that
within
aspect.
3K to use your blasters.
Yeah, you're basically touching them to use them, but that's fine.
Well,
torpedoes need some love. I think firewalls are too strong right now. Like there's a bunch of things CCP could do to like mix things up. Like imagine if like Blaster Rokes did 1200 DPS or something, right? At like 30K. Like that just changes the whole meta right away, but they don't. They don't.
What
do
if you
that.
had what if you had like command ships in the battleship class? Like just because if you look at all the other ships class, the frigates, cruisers, destroyers, all that, they have
Yeah.
5 tiers above them, while battleships have 3. And it's Marauders, Black Ops, and the faction. It's like you.
Well,
You
I
have
think that we should rebalance the stuff we have before we add more. Like the command ships already have so much tank, like they can kind of compete on a battleship scale.
But you mentioned Brave doesn't use tier 1 battleships. I mean,
Not anymore.
Well, not anymore, but we do on occasion. We do praxis fleets. Those are a specialty little fun group that we do, and those happen every once in a while. We just did one last night actually, but it's like it's just not practical because if we pull out battleships, then somebody, not going to name anybody in particular, port, will come over top of us and upship us, and then we have to upship that, and the next thing you know, we're in a full-blown capital fight. It's just no matter what we do, we're always being countered to a higher tier. I
Right.
mean,
That's
unless
gonna
you,
be the.
I'm saying like
That's
the
the
T1
game, right?
battleship should be able, like maybe they lose like the, maybe you lose more T1 battleships.
to be fair though,
Represent a threat, which they mostly don't right now.
to be fair though, I remember living with that problem in a early version of test, and the answer is just artillery battleships.
Yeah.
If somebody
thing.
wants to counter drop your fucking Tempest or Maelstrom fleet, even though they got facts, let them, and then just be like, yeah, or sync up your Alpha and volley some Barghest, and all of a sudden they won't be doing that again.
Yeah,
right?
from 200K away. Yeah.
And Billy, that is the other problem, is that like in the battleship class, like artillery are kind of like disproportionately dominant. Like yes, the paladin is okay,
True.
but that's because tachyons are kind of in their own class. Like that's the only reason actually that they're good, is tachyons are kind of like, it's like
Super high volley.
they're kind of almost in like a third class, where there's like the mega beams, the dual heavy beams, and then the tachyons are in like a third class, And whereas like with artillery you just have 1200 or 1400, right? The tachyons are like, they require extra fitting, extra cap, but they're like above and beyond really, and that's the only reason. But by and large, the battleship meta is just heavily artillery right now, and I think that's really a shame. Like missiles.
I think the obvious answer is that cruise and torpedoes both need some buffs. I think if we could get a like 10-kilometer range buff to torpedoes, that would make a huge difference.
And,
at the same
the
time,
difference
if we could
between
get
torpedo and cruise DPS also isn't high enough. Like it's higher
Correct.
on torps, but it's not. It should be significantly higher. Like torp should be, like, you trade so much to use a torpedo, you should get more benefit out of it.
Well,
And
they both need some application buffing because
Correct. Yeah.
the application on both of them is just fucking terrible.
Explosion radius you're talking about, right?
Well, explosion radius and explosion velocity, like they both.
CCP have done some very creative things on the newer ship balance that they haven't done retroactively. Like all the new Galente balances that they've done, like they're kind of like, they have high agility and like pretty high speed to get in range with their blasters and stuff. Whereas like, so like arguably like the Megathrons, they should get like a little more damage with the blasters and then get the speed and agility to actually be able to get in range. That would actually change things for them. Like they could do some things like that, where, because right now it's just like, artillery or bust, right? Like use a TFI or some people use Macarials, not that much anymore, but like they're just heavily favored, and they're
Sure.
with lasers as a second, and then just nothing else
Yeah, and
basically.
rails are just
And can you
nothing.
imagine if maybe we adjusted battleship signature radius enough that it mattered?
Yeah, or just like, I don't know, like railguns are probably just a little too weak in general on the battleship class, and there's not enough differential. Like, there's not a big enough difference between the long range and the short range guns on most battleship. Like, for
Uh,
all the trade-offs that range, like it's
the
not an
difference between
accident,
blasters and rails is night and day.
I would say
right?
I would agree with that with lasers. Not a huge because
But
you can
Billy,
get
it
a
has to be even
pulses
more
pretty
than
far
night
out
and
there.
day, because like for every like range is so important in Eve that like you just notice, what do people pick time and time again? Every single,
Well, they always pick the rails
they always pick range.
because
Like
it's night and
what do
day.
hacks use?
You're
None of
saying they
them.
have to be closer together?
No, I'm saying like right now there's a decent on paper benefit to using blasters, but it should be like god tier because you sacrifice so much to get it, right? And same with all of the close range weapon systems. Like they're kind of, you know, they're not good enough basically to justify using them at the moment on a fleet scale, and they
Well, because
probably should
anybody's
be.
got range on you is gonna. I mean, you're screwed. I mean, unless
Like
you can control the engagement, you're fucked with blasters.
Like when I started playing Eve in 2007, there was always like, oh my god, like you gotta watch out if you're in blaster range, right? But now, what's the most dangerous close range guns? It's Lashaks, it's fucking auto cannons on a Vargur, it's like rapid heavies. Like nobody's talking about blasters because they're just garbage, right?
It's so easy to get that range, right? The game's it's easy to control range.
Yeah,
Not, I
Lashak
mean, it's
has
not
more
easy. You know
range
what I
and
mean?
more
Yeah,
damage,
yeah. Exactly.
after a couple spools. So
I do remember being scared of blaster Proteuses.
Well, nowadays, if you want to use close range, you're only going to do that crap when you're ratting.
yeah.
Oh, maybe there is something to say that for having certain guns are good for PvP, certain guns are good for PvE. There's nothing wrong with that too. I mean, you don't
Well,
have
it's
to have
just like
every
right
gun.
now,
Every gun
there's
doesn't
not
have
an
to be perfect
accident.
for PvP, right?
Every group in the game is getting TFIs. Like that should not be happening. Like there should be like, I think the volley on battleships is a bit overtuned. Like the volley of a TFI is just too good with 0 damage mods. Like it shouldn't be that good. And like what happens is nobody's getting Scorp navies, nobody getting Raven navies. Very few people are getting Megathron navies, although Init mixes them into theirs, but it's just to vary the damage type. They're still not very good.
So
Nobody's getting anything basically except for Tempest fleet issues right now, and that's just a shame. Like there's no reason that should happen.
But in the past, CCP has reacted to that thing before, right? Ishtars, Munins, they've reacted to that type of thing in the past. Time. Do you think now that they'll react faster? You think they're getting better at reacting to one ship dominating and then making changes, or is that something we even want them to do?
I mean, I think they're getting somewhat better at it. Very like selective.
I mean, it took them a long time for the Munins. I'm not gonna lie, right? I mean,
well, and the Munins kind of were the same problem that the TFIs are now, right? Now that the meta's more battleship heavy, what are people going for? A Minmatar artillery platform again, like big surprise, right?
And also the platform that gives you the most escapability because you can fit an MJD if you're.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, think about it too. When people used to structure bass, they'd use battleships, and you'd use like the old school maelstroms back in the day. Well, now it's like you can go get a fleet of, instead of getting together 80 guys in battleships, you can get 20 guys in a Kiki and go a Kikimora and go over and reinforce something in a tenth of the time it would take you to do a battleship.
And to some degree, I think that's okay. Like, I think it's good to have options because the Kikis are weak in other ways, right? If an Orthrus comes on grid, you're just going to lose all your Kikis, whereas that wouldn't happen with battleships. So that's like, in some degree, I think that there's some inherent balance there. I just think the problem is that you have what, like 25 different battleships, and maybe like 3 or 4 of them get routine use in fleets, and the rest of them are just not usable for a variety of reasons. And I have tried to push the envelope in that. Like we use different battleships that just because they're fun or they are cool or something, but like by and large, like if you could, like most of the time it's easier and more effective just to pick a TFI. It was like that with hacks too, right?
Well, for sure. And it also depends on how
What would you?
important is this fight? How important is the objective? If it is super important, you don't fuck around with weird doctrines and shit. You're not sure about. It's fun to do weird doctrines, go out and do stuff. But if it's an important fight, everyone falls back to the main stage, right? Because that's the smart thing to do.
Yeah. I'm just tired of the meta being like Minmatar artillery platforms. Like, it's just, like, because the problem is it pushes a very specific meta, which is like high EHP, like, and huge numbers, because like you're just going to be trading. Like, there's no, it kind of like takes a lot of the nuance out of the game, right? Like, because there's just nothing, in a fleet scenario, there's always so many webs and paints around that you're not going to be able to realistically get rid of them in a reasonable amount of time. So like, it's not like you can like sig tank them like you could in the old days, really. And so people, like, if you fight people with enough artillery, like, you're just gonna die, and there's nothing you can really counterplay against it, because they can pick the damage type, they can pick the range, there's tracking ammo. Like, projectile ammo is really strong, and when you combine that with one of the tankiest, cheapest battleships, like, there's just no competition,
Well,
right?
but when it comes to big fights,
Trust
that's
and
always
run.
been the thing, right? Whoever's got the most numbers, you got both sides at the same exact ship. Who's got the most numbers, or whoever makes the first mistake, right? That's always been a thing. There's not a lot of nuance for the average player in a big fight. There isn't small gangs, but we're talking about big fights here. There isn't much nuance. Now, there's nuance for the FCs and the planning. That's where that the strategy comes in, when to fight, where to fight. But the actual fight itself, for the average player, there's not any nuance really. I mean, it doesn't really matter what ship they're in.
For the record, whoever said horde guy tired of Artie Slepners, yes, I am. Like, I think it's silly that we have to have that doctrine. I would much rather have something else, but like, unfortunately, they're so good.
I was just saying they're pretty fucking effective, aren't
Like
they?
I've pointed out, just because I think that there's something messed up in game balance, it's not my personal responsibility to not use it. Like, it's CCP's job to balance the game, and I'm not gonna like take a massive disadvantage to myself just because I don't like something, right?
Yeah,
Like,
'cause
that
you
would be like, oh, you don't like Ansiblexes, so I guess you just should never use them, right? Like,
No,
you think they're overpowered. It's not a good argument.
I think Village made this point before too. We can all not like certain ships, but if it wins, you got to, you don't want to lose.
Suboptimal for the sake of it.
It's a
right?
competitive game. You cannot, choose to be uncompetitive, or you will invariably find yourself kicked out of the game in a way, right?
For sure, yeah. I know we've talked about that before. Like, that you can't just like, oh, I hate that ship, so I'm never going to use it again. Well, then you're going to lose the fights because that tends to be the ship that works right now. Yeah.
What's like those rail harpies y'all been using a lot? Those things are fucking insane. The ones that Zigum's always bringing around.
Securitas. That's his fault.
No, I mean,
He's
I
planning.
don't
He
like
plans all this stuff. He's telling us he doesn't. It's him.
I don't like rail harpies personally, to be honest with you. I much prefer retributions, but
So Securitas is the black hat, a black hand of Horde,
I
basically.
think so. He
No.
seems like he knows everything.
No, I just like, I've been playing the game for a long time, and I spent a lot of time fucking around with Pytha and trying things, but
I was just teasing.
I don't know.
used to
I just
tease
like,
Billy about it too.
there's a lot of like local maximums, so to speak, in the ship design now, that like I feel like CCP could sort of like smooth out with relatively minimal effort. Like, if the TFI EHP went down by 10% and the volley went down, but the rate of fire went up or something like that, so the DPS was pretty similar. Like, I think that would change things. And like, it doesn't have to be like night and day tweaks. Like, if the Megathron gets, 10 or 15% more blaster damage, and then it's a bit faster, and it has like that plate bonus that a lot of Galente ships are getting nowadays, where like the plates don't make it slow. Like, that would actually be pretty beastly, right? Like, imagine a Doctrine Megathron with a bit more range on the blasters, like a blaster centric damage bonus, and like, it's a bit quicker, and like the plates don't slow it down. That would be super interesting, because you would have the meta of like, okay, well, they have TFIs and they can volley, but if I get on them at 0 and each of my Megatrons is doing 1300 DPS, I have to get within 10 or 15k, but if I do that, they're gonna fucking melt. Like, there's some counterplay now, and then the counterplay is, can they keep you off of them for long enough before they kill enough, right?
So is other than going to capitals, right now the counter to the TFIs is just more TFIs. Is there a fleet out there that really does well against them?
The counter to TFIs currently is a mix of bombers, T1 Tempests, and obviously normal other TFIs. I mean, obviously, Paladins can beat them too in certain situations, but
depends if you care about winning the ISK war. If you just want to win the engagement and there's not weird tie-dye fuckery, I think you can probably beat them with Paladins, but you'll probably lose more ISK. But like, if
you're talking even numbers of Paladins versus even numbers of TFI.
Yeah, if you just care about winning the fight, and you don't, like, let's say okay, I want to win the field, and I'm okay with taking more losses. Yeah, you can probably beat them with Paladins that cost 3 times as much. right?
But that's also, to be fair. I mean, I
But
know
like that
most people
shouldn't be
playing
the
it around.
only option. Is what
Most
I'm
people have been
saying.
playing a long time. I get that, but not everyone can fly paladin. I mean, I know probably
Well,
everybody here
right.
can, so that makes it a harder choice.
And that shouldn't be the only option because
Yeah.
right now none of the other, insufficient numbers of TFI, obviously if you have like 20 TFIs and they have 20 of some other battleship, maybe you can beat that, right? Because the volley's not high enough. But when you're talking about like medium to large scale fights and it's a big blob of TFIs and a big blob of whatever other battleship, I'm not saying it's impossible, but like definitely the TFIs are just favored to win against almost everything else, all things being equal.
Yes,
Mostly.
please blow up paladins because I love salvaging them.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
never been a doctrine where it's designed to be ISK efficient, right? You're flying a 2 billion ISK battleship. You're never going to win the ISK war unless you do things you execute very well.
But like most battleships, TFIs aren't that good in small groups. I mean, it's got to be a decent sized group right before they.
Artillery always needs critical mass. Once you hit critical mass for whatever you're facing, then all of a sudden it's go time.
Yeah.
And then every battleship above that is a battleship you can lose while you maintain that critical mass. So
It's basically amazing or bust, right?
I
Say
feel
again,
like
sorry?
every time Billy starts explaining something, I'm in a college classroom and he's the professor teaching it, and it just makes sense. But I don't remember it next week.
He's a smart dude. Yeah.
Like
But-
imagine how cool if like it would be like if every block had their own kind of unique battleship doctrine, like like B3 had, I don't know, rattlesnakes or scorpion navy issues and they were like still viable, and Horde had whatever we had, I don't know, Megathrons or something,
That would
and
be cool,
Goons
and
had
they're all viable. Yeah.
and
That'd be-
Goons had Abaddons, and like maybe one of them is better in this scenario and one of it, but they're all like workable and they all do the job instead of like everyone just making a mad dash to fill fleets with as many TFIs as possible.
Well, Goons used to have a really amazing Megathron. I can't believe I just did a Transformers thing. Megathron doctrine that was insane, and you didn't want to go up against that. And back in the days when I was in test, which I'm scared to admit that, back in those days in Fountain campaign against Goons, we used the Maelstrom, the artillery Maelstroms, 1400 millimeter Tech 2s. Oh, brings back good memories.
By the way,
I remember those days.
that actually suppresses a lot of viable fleets is void bombs. I know people don't think about that, but basically every shield ship in nullsec has to have a cap booster because of void bombs. And the problem with that is that shield ships really need their mids for buffer usually. And so you have to give up some of the buffer for that. And so I don't really know what the solution to that is, but there would be more viable shield doctrines if you could use all your slots for tank, because armor just has an inherent tank advantage. It might make shields maybe a little too strong. You'd have to kind of look at that, but
I think void bombs hurt the shacks too, though.
they do. But I
I
think
mean, you have to spool
they
back
have
up
cap
after
boosters.
every one.
Yeah, the Lashaks have open mids for cap boosters.
And,
So.
and I'm,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure we do. But I mean, but you still have to spool up after they hit you with one. Yeah.
Sure, but
Well,
like
that's
if
assuming you don't inject.
there's
them
some
as you hit it.
counterplay,
True,
whereas
yeah.
like like for example, like a lot of shield hacks and shield battle cruisers aren't viable because they don't have them enough mid slots to have a cap booster. The Sleipnir kind of gets away with it because it has like capless guns and stuff, but like that is a problem. Is like if you're designing a shield battleship, battle cruiser, command ship, hack, whatever. Otherwise, you get hit by one or two void bombs, and you're going to have a really bad day.
Especially if they hit your Logi also, yeah.
Yes. So, that's
just-
hard to balance, but
that just gives you a little extra pucker factor. I like that.
that's why the TFI is kind of like it has like all the different factors that make doctrine viable. It's armor, it has high volley, it has capless guns, it has selectable damage type, it has enough mid slots for EWAR and and cap boosters, and it's cheap, right? And you just put all those things together, and it's really hard. That's a hard combination to beat.
Well, even like armor typhoons too.
Yes, the problem is armor typhoons use missiles, and missiles are extremely easy to counter, and in tie-dye they just fucking don't work basically.
Dude, I have a auto targeting double rep armor typhoon fit, and I used to love flying it and going around and just popping off missiles, and people are like, "Who's he targeting? Who's he targeting?"
Yeah, but that sounds like fun, but that really wouldn't work as like a mainstay like large fleet group. Because for one, I do like those the what's that module called where you don't know who you're getting targeted. I love that module, but at a big scale, not feasible. I'm trying, not
You don't,
feasible.
you don't even need the module for that. You just have the auto targeting cruise missiles in there, and then you just activate it, and it goes.
Is it the friend of foe ones you're talking about?
Let me see.
Oh, isn't it?
It's a FOF, right? Those.
Yeah, fire and forget. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I've never used them very much. There's a module that allows you to lock somebody. And they don't know you're locking. I can't remember the name.
There's
of
a
it.
passive targeting
Yeah.
array. It goes up.
We've
in
tried
the
to do
top.
that with big groups. As long as no one fucks it up, you can volley people that way. But no, you can't get more than 10 people to do it correctly ever. These people I know.
I just want T3Cs back. I never got to fly them.
People still fly T3Cs. You could join in it.
They don't fly them though.
I'm also blacklisted by goons.
I mean, I've flown T3Cs a few times lately. They're definitely you have to pick the right environment for them. But
I was
think
on
I've-
one.
Nice to meet someone else blacklisted by goons.
Well, I guess never mind. The Black Ops group still flies them because I just was in one.
Yeah, actually, no. There was one time I flew T3Cs with some small little alliance. We flew. I forget what it was. I think the name of the doctrine was like Kink Doctrine or something. I don't know. The person who ran the alliance at the time had this obsession with like calling his fleets like Kink or Tits or Boob Fleet. Like I mean, who would ever?
You talking about Redline?
No,
Is that you? Oh, that was you. Sorry.
no, that's not me. Goofball.
Fucking Redline, Jesus.
I know you can't take it anywhere.
I would never do that for any reason.
I know.
Red lines. I'm
No,
the
it's always the
church
it's the cum fleet. Yeah, we know.
Stop! Not the cum fleet. Anything but the cum fleet.
Yeah, ham goos are fun.
Cum
The favorite ship I miss, and it'll probably never come back. The Slip Repeat. God, that was fun.
No, people still fly slip repeats.
Do they?
Yeah, it's just more specialized things.
Okay.
But I mean, so I listened to you guys talk about the ships, and like one of the first things I heard was that the costs were like everything was really expensive. But you guys are choosing to fly these ships, right? Like you could all fly 200 mil hacks if you wanted to.
No, I'm forced. It is ridiculous.
Well, it's the invariable battle of you want to take the comp that is stronger than the other guy, and usually the better comp is more expensive, right? So the
Sure.
it's
200
not
mil comp
cost,
usually.
Redline, it's value. Like the TFI is a couple hundred mil more than the Tempest, but it's so much better that it kind of makes it pseudo obsolete. Like if the Tempest was the cost of a hack, which actually I think would be very interesting. Like if battleships cost about the same as a hack, I think hacks are too cheap. But if battleships T1 battleships were in line with the cost of a hack, suddenly the proposition of flying TFIs, even though you haven't changed the TFI at all, is very different, because if people can fly a battleship that's like 80% as good or 70% as good for 30 or 40% of the cost, then suddenly it's very different. And same with the Paladins, by the way, is they also become a lot less viable if you can fly a bunch of 300 mil Tempests around as well. Even though they'll die quickly, they will kill things very quickly. So the T1 battleships are just too expensive compared to the faction ones. It's not that the faction ones are too absolutely expensive. It's just the relative cost is too close.
Gotcha. I understand. So you weren't being like, well, it's too expensive. You were just
No, if anything, I think the TFIs are too cheap. Like
What? That fucker's expensive.
TFIs are pretty fucking cheap. I mean,
like for what they offer, they're really cheap. Like, but like I think CCP did a good job of rebalancing them, because like a lot of people, I mean, the TFI was always an exception, but a lot of people weren't flying faction battleships at all. And broadly speaking, they're more viable. There's some more interesting choices, but they didn't do anything about the T1 battleships to give them a reason to exist. Because now that the faction ones are so good, like why would you pick the T1 that's like barely cheaper?
well, plus there's the other aspect too. Like a lot of alliances, they don't want to have 75 doctrines and only fly like maybe 10 at the most. So to make it more viable for the membership, you reduce yourself down to a limited number of doctrines so that people aren't just spending ISK willy-nilly to buy doctrines 6 through 16, and then you may only use the ships once or twice. And these people, some of the people that don't have a huge ISK income, are therefore like, well, I got these ships, we're not using them. What's the deal?
I think you're not in the Imperium.
No, I choose in Brave.
Okay.
Well,
It seems like we've
Yeah.
got like 900 fucking doctrines out of it.
I'm a Brave Diplo and FC and all that shit. So
And you know what? That does that. I mean, that does kind of tie into the MEI. So I could probably put that graphic on the screen because you
Hell yeah.
were mentioning like people not spending their ISK. If you look at the money supply graph on the most recent MER, it doesn't look like people are spending their ISK at all. I guess that's not true. The total amount of ISK is going up, but
Is
if
there
you
a
look at
velocity of ISK graph? Because that's always the most
yes,
telling one.
No,
Yeah.
okay, this first one, money supply.
Oh, see, that's not good.
yeah,
Money
so
supply
this
to the
is
players. That's what
supply.
peers are amassing. That's what
Yep.
they're amassing, and this is the
Yep.
one they're selling. That's what they're spending. The next
So
one.
this is the rate of acquisition of currency,
Okay.
and this is the rate of spending said currency.
You got a
So
bunch of
people are getting money
frugal.
and they're keeping it.
Why can't I do
Well,
that?
see,
God
but that's the
damn it.
problem, Redline. Paradoxically, like, actually, I think a cheaper doctrine would increase the use of that doctrine. Like, let's say that T1 battleships are 300 mil fitted or something. I think people are going to be way more aggressive about using those because now everyone's sitting on these TFI whatever doctrines, and I think they're still cheap for what they offer, but the absolute cost is very high. So FCs are kind of reluctant to drop them around on stuff, right? Because like if you lose, it's going to be 30 bill. So then everyone kind of like sits and holds their precious faction battleships because you don't want anyone to just take them out. But you know, if you had something affordable like that. And the good thing about battleships is I think in a way they actually promote more fights because they're so immobile that there's always going to be random people getting stuck or like you don't align very quickly. Like it offers a lot of opportunities for mistakes to happen, which is actually good for the game because hacks are so mobile. I'll be honest, I drop a lot on hack fleets, right? I drop on Brave, I drop on Goons. And usually what happens is we drop, we kill like 10 things, and then whoever the FC is says, turn your MWD on, align to the sun or whatever. And like all these hacks are going 2,500, like the fight's just over in seconds. And what that means is, that it's almost like not even worth my time to drop some of these hack fleets because hacks are so cheap and you drop on them and then a couple of them die. And like, but like, there's no commitment. And so like there's definitely some activity that doesn't happen because everything's just so mobile. Whereas if the cheaper things were actually tougher and like slower, but they were like affordable, like battleships, then hacks are not the default choice anymore. Because if you bring hacks and they bring battleships, they cost the same as you, but they're better, and their only disadvantages are they're slower. But it means if you're willing to fight them, that they can get stuck more easily, and like interesting things can happen. Or if I drop paladins or my battleship doctrine, I can get bubbled, and then I get stuck, and then other people can come catch me, right? Which has happened multiple times, by the way. So it's more interesting if there's cheaper, capable battleship doctrines than everything just being faction battleships and paladins and all that.
I got to ask a question about the what's that called? The graph.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is just like people buying ships and modules and crap, not contracts and not buying Plex, correct?
Correct.
Is that what that
that's
means?
The one
Right,
without
right.
contracts and plex.
Yeah. Right.
well, plus there's another caveat to this. I know I keep saying that a lot. It's the inflationary costs of items in game. So CCP makes it more complicated to make ships, more complicated to make modules. You can only get certain ores in certain spaces and all this. It's not helping. So people are being more conservative, in my opinion, on how they're spending. Like some ships have gone down. Like flycatchers used to be like 75 mil a piece, and now you can get the hull for 45, which I love to death. Like, because I bought 40 of them the other day. I love flycatchers. Sabers used to be like 125 a piece, and now they're dropped down to like 60, give or take. And Erises are like just dirt cheap because nobody flies those.
Can you go back to the graph before? I just want to check something.
Yeah, the money supply.
Yes.
I mean, so basically, just like the, I don't know. It strikes me as odd that people, aren't spending more with all the
That's a
stuff
huge
being so
differential.
cheap.
I'm
Well,
very
they don't
curious
die
what
very
that.
often though, like because everyone's so careful with them because they're so expensive. Like the default has to be a faction battleship because everyone else is flying them because the T1 ones are not viable. So
What
that means that
happened?
everyone kind of sits around and like doesn't take fights because
What
Redline,
happened
is it-
between guys? One sec. What happened between November and December, 2022, that would have caused that giant spike um, in the total ISK monetary supply? What took place between November and December?
did
What
people
changed?
reactivate their accounts? Was there like a deal or something? Because it's available to active characters. It's not necessarily ISK being generated, so it could
Oh,
just
was
mean
that when
there's
they had that mega like
The
sale for
free
Yeah.
Plex?
weekend or
Maybe.
Yes.
something.
Yep.
Oh, so maybe this data is not necessarily as bad as it looks. It's much more a lot of people with accounts came back, and then all of a sudden that was a giant.
And to be
ISK
fair, this
supply
isn't per
entering.
character, right? Which would be more relative. So we actually want this to go up because the more people play the game, the higher the money supply will be,
Yeah, because
right?
I mean, for the most part, it seems fine. Aside from that, like, there's like a really big jump of like, what's this?
Well, they did a
150
40
free
trillion.
weekend.
Yeah.
Redline, do they happen to break this down any further, like in comparison to those that are like money supply for like PVE versus market versus like just like any other forms of income, like Plex?
About the best I can do is I can zoom in a little bit for you. That's really it. I'll look and see, but I don't think they go that deep into it.
I mean, it would be helpful if they did because it would give us a better understanding of how the ISK is being cultivated.
What I find is
I
interesting
think
is
that's
the characters are
possible
making more
jump,
money
right?
than the corporations. I like that by a
I
large
mean,
amount. Yeah.
this is the sinks and faucets graph. This kind of gives you an idea. This is where the money's coming from. So it's from bounty prizes, commodities. So that's like blue loot and stuff like that. And then you got the Sancha incursions, Triglavian invasion, still holding strong there. There's 6 multi-boxers doing God's work out there in Poshvin.
Hey, yeah, I camp out there. It's fun.
Yeah, there's no particular jump in November to December for like that would cause that ISK supply. So I think it must have been
This guy right
a
here,
resub deal,
this
or
is
maybe.
this is the jump around the same time. These are quarters. These little guys down here. Each segment is a quarter.
You see, in October 2022, the transaction tax just dips.
No increases.
No, it dips right here-ish.
You're taking out 1 trillion as opposed to half a trillion.
There was a giant jump in the
I would bet you
commodities
money then,
market.
yeah, that is what we had. Is we had a massive resub from a deal, which caused the player count to spike upwards, which means more taxes, which means a whole lot more people buying Plex and selling Plex, etc.
Oh, November was around the time for the faction warfare rework as well. That's when
Yeah.
that all started, so that may have been a good way to get people more active. So I don't think it's just an influx of ISK. I think it is just people reactivating their accounts to try new shit. But I don't know. They may be done with that now.
With faction warfare?
Well, no, I mean the people who came in November to try it. Like maybe they left already. I don't know.
I mean, it's
I
possible,
hope
but
not.
from what I've seen, I don't think so.
It doesn't look like. Yeah, I was saying it doesn't seem to be. I mean, it hasn't like the whole game hasn't shifted to it, but it definitely people are very active in faction warfare, more than they were before.
That's for sure. Especially now because everybody can just go there. Myself, I am enlisted in the Kaldari militia. So
You have to listen to me now. Yeah,
why do I have to listen to you?
I'm a strike commander in the Kaldari militia. You damn right I am.
How do you do
That's-
that?
I did faction warfare for a long time.
He's
That's
talking
awesome.
about the
ranks, yeah.
Do those ranks still exist?
Well,
Yeah, of
still on my
course.
character sheet.
He's
Yeah,
talking about the in-game
it doesn't mean
ranks that
anything.
don't really mean anything.
Hey,
Yeah,
I'm a
no,
strike
they-
commander. You
they
show
Unless you're
some
an
respect.
RPer.
It's like the World of Warcraft PvP ranks. That's still sick though. Like
I feel like at this point we just need to play Austin Powers Nerd Alert sound and just move on.
no, that's not. That's
I
not what we need to do
demand
at all.
respect. What the hell do you mean?
I don't think you can have it because that's not how respect works. You can't just demand it. There was
People
another
do
graph,
all the
though.
time. What do you mean?
I mean, if you're in the Minmatar militia, I'd respect you, but
this one. Where is it?
Well, we're gonna be friends now. Maybe I'll do it.
Maybe.
Going through all my graphs. Oh, it's this one. The economic indices. So this one, this has some fun stuff: the consumer price index, mineral price index, primary producer price index, and secondary price index. There's a big jump there, and it's the mineral price index is still very high, and I was trying to think of why.
Isogen, baby.
That's when they took. It's the start of scarcity.
No, I mean just right now. Like right now, the mineral price index is very high
Because
compared
they've
to
introduced
everything
ships that
else.
people need to build, aka faction dreads, and the mineral supply is not equal or effectively equal to the amount that needs to be built. So price stays high and the demand for minerals exceeds the supply. That kind of makes
But
sense.
the initial
It
spike was the
does,
start of scarcity, and
but
the ones really mass work mining like they used to. So
how do
Well,
we?
and
obviously the
then
mineral
faction
supply is
dreads
not what it
coming
used to
out
be
just
either.
But
spiked it again.
how do we have a real life economic crisis in a video game though?
Who
'Cause
said we
that's
have an
like,
economic crisis?
well, that's what this would be, or what it's leading to, rather. Because this is like,
Does it?
yeah, it's a, I forget what it was called. I watched a video about
Eve
like
economies don't work the same way real
inflation.
economies work.
They totally do. It was
Not necessarily.
I'm gonna look it up. There was a term that I heard, and that's exactly what is happening here. It's the exact
MPI
same thing.
isn't inflation, right? It's just there's a lot of requirement for minerals at the moment, so the price is increasing. But there will be events that will then drop the required minerals, like no war. People have built all their faction dreads, and that will then start to slope down again.
Now, is this graph showing the mining index in ISK or in volume? Kind of, what's the 240 or 260 what?
What are you looking at?
Trillion. Your full your economic indices full history. Your mining index, right? Isn't that what the MPI is? That's what
Yeah,
we're
I
talking
mean,
about, right? It's
I
what did
don't.
we measure it in? There's no, it didn't say.
So these are CCP graphs. Respectfully, it doesn't have a legend. So
Does
for
anybody
this,
know though? I'm asking. Yeah.
Well, they all seem to start at 100. So is it just like relative to the original when it started? I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, it would make sense because it
They all
starts.
started exactly 100. So logically, I would think it would be some sort of relative index compared to when the game like was created. I don't know.
Okay,
Well, the
so
code date is 2004, so that would make sense.
so right now things are 260%. Like minerals are 260% of the cost.
I don't know
they
if
were at
it's
the
like
beginning of the game.
I don't
That
know
makes
if it's
sense.
like a direct percentage or if it's like has more like you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I mean for the most part that looks correct, like to a degree, right?
I'm glad I asked the question. None of you knew the answer.
Well, I mean, we still don't. We just have an idea what it could be.
Don't we know some people on CCP or CSM that we can ask?
No,
I don't think we
no,
do.
we
Do
don't.
we?
I ran, but I didn't get elected, so it wouldn't be me.
It was a good showing though. I was proud of you.
Yeah, first one out. That was solid work from me. Inferno is the one that rebalanced the cruisers. That's old times.
Because it is fun looking at a chart that you don't know what it means.
Well, no, I mean,
I like it. I
see
like
if
it.
I can find another one that's got the legend. But I
You said the
mean,
legend shows below
this
above
is
the years.
So it's the so if you read it, it's the chained Lasperite, whatever it's called, which is so I'm just looking at what the definition of it is. It is a methodology used to calculate consumer price index by measuring the change of a price of basket of goods relative to the price last year. So that is a percentage effectively.
okay.
So since 2004, it's gone up 250 some percent.
160%.
That's how I read it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Oh yeah, gone up 160. Right, 160%.
Yeah, so things are 260% what they would have costed in 2004. Which, I mean, that's kind of how
That
real
makes
world
sense.
inflation works. But there was it's like what it was that caused, like, there was a supply shortage and then a huge demand all at once. but then there was excess supply as well, and I don't know, things got real cheap, and then they got real scarce, and then they got really expensive. That's how it worked.
I don't know, Thanos. Does anybody? Did we already talk about somebody feeding? I don't know.
We did
I mean,
not.
I'm in Pratt, and I have no idea what that was about. So
I'm told, so I do have that battle report. I'm pretty sure it is right here, in Shosen, Iridia. I was told this was a bait op, and that LSH was baiting Fraternity and Shadow Cartel, and did so successfully, killing a ton of dreads in the process. We do have some resident snuffed out guests, but they're not here right now. I'm certain they could tell us. But I don't know.
It was Snuff versus Shadow, or
It was LSH and Snuffed Out and Friends. I see some
Nice.
Blue Crab people here as well,
It
which
was
is
Russians baiting Chinese,
unfortunate.
essentially.
Yeah.
Why does
And
is it like a frat sig or something there? Like why
No,
is there frat
it's
dreads there?
it's have you not seen like
is
Chinese dread
LSH making a
bombs? There
comeback?
it's
Nice.
Chinese dread. It's so weird. Like you get like people from every alliance, Chinese alliance, like just dread bombing together randomly.
I have to say I've never seen that before, but I believe it.
When snuff baited our like our blops, and we like kind of chain fed to them like triage. It was like frat Dracarys AOM dreads that got dropped on us for a snuff op.
Who's we?
Big Ab. We got baited in
Okay.
Amazon, but it was like frat Dracarys and AOM like all flying dreads together. It's a super common thing in the Chinese community.
So it's probably kind of hard to scout that kind of thing, right? Because they're just kind of all spread out, probably. And
I just want to know what started it. Because apparently Snuffed Out got there late, so they didn't start it. So it would have had to have been LSH that started it.
Mouthing off, I guarantee it.
Mouthing off. I don't know, man. I don't know, but it looks cool. All told, like 134 bill worth of dreads and assorted ships dead, which is always fun.
LSH has always been a thorn if you want to try to go through Iridia. It's kind of good that they're back, I guess. I don't know.
That's a good way to put it. A thorn. But I see here. What's this? What are these blue crab people doing? What version of this alliance is this?
that is a LSH Alpha Alliance at this point.
But it didn't used to be, did it? I thought it was something different.
Oh, it was it's something different that Anur killed, but it's 3 Better owns the alliance now. So
Oh, okay. But what originally they weren't tied together originally, right?
nope. They were the original. It was they were. The name was the meme on LSH.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
Because it was we are doing the Nullsec version of what LSH does in Lowsec. But
I worked with them
3 Better
when we
owns the
were.
alliance now, so it's just an LSH alliance at this point.
Worked with LSH a few times when we were at Fountain Core. I don't know. Back then they were pretty competent. I don't know about now.
I think LSH is still pretty competent from what I see of them.
Kind of like faded there for a bit. I mean, nothing really matters to me, but I do kind of think it's cool that I like seeing groups come back, make comebacks.
It's only 3 of them, so don't get too excited.
I thought it's a 26. Not NSH, LSH.
Not NSH.
I mean, I'm focused on NSH because anytime I see that name, I'm just reminded of the deep betrayal on behalf of a fleet of griffins. And it makes me bitter and angry. The what?
You're coping.
I'm not coping. I didn't even play the game at that time.
I want a Zumitra, damn it.
I had one I could have sold you. I won it on the Hypernet a while back.
Is that why you were bitching about the ISK? You're broke now because you've spent it all on your gambling?
No.
1-800 bets off, mister.
Did what now?
1-800 bets off. Come on now.
No, I don't need any of that.
Can't believe you won that fucking. That still pisses me off. Luckiest man alive winning a goddamn AT ship.
Oh yeah, with 1 token. Me and Billy were talking about that earlier.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's not that crazy. It happens all the time. People win hypernet tickets with 1 ticket. Like
I don't.
It's a thing that happens.
Fucker.
Do you try?
Yeah, you talked me into it, and I lost a whole bunch of ISK.
Man,
Didn't win a
do you
goddamn thing.
Do you know how much ISK I've lost from that though?
Less than the 100 and whatever 70 billion you got from that one show.
No, definitely more than that. Definitely more than that.
You've lost more than you've won.
Yes.
Then why do you
Pretty
keep
sure.
doing it?
I don't now. I had a
You know what? The house
windfall
always
of like
wins, so.
140 billion ISK, and I don't
And you
need to
blew
do
it.
it anymore. I still
Call it
have it all. I
gambling
bought
addiction,
Plex.
Dognut.
I bought Plex, and all of it sits in my Plex vault until such a time that I decide that I'm going to spend all of my ISK on spaceships and running fleets in space.
He is goddamn amazing. It's ridiculous.
I am pretty goddamn amazing.
You
that is
are.
true.
You make
but
me look
this
stupid.
show's not about me though.
It is about you.
I'll tell you what it is about though, because there's something that I saw on Twitter. Our homie Torvald posted on Twitter that they were getting rid of the abyssal arenas. Did you guys see anything about that at all?
Completely?
Well, I don't know about completely, because it's hard to say. But there was a post on what is it, Hobo Leaks, showing that the event filament was no longer being published, like it was gone, it was done. I don't know. And Torvald said that he's basically going to be quitting the game because
Sorry.
they're not doing the abyssal proving grounds anymore.
I wonder if it's because they're going to come up with something even better.
Well, that's what I'm hoping.
Come on, Torvald. Have some faith.
It's CCP. They don't come up with anything better. They just break more
I
shit.
don't believe that at all.
Well,
Yeah, I
Doesn't
mean,
matter if they
I
don't
think
do it
the
now,
reality is that they probably felt that they weren't getting sufficient interest compared to the amount of players that were involved or could be involved, I guess, or I don't know how to say it properly, but obviously there was not that many people doing it.
but
It was very
what's having it hurt though?
well, it requires somebody every week to program it. It requires, adding stuff into the game, and it
Rotating.
probably looks a little bad on them when you have these events and people, go to filament and then they can't get the thing to start because there's not enough people actually doing it. I don't know, like, the answer, but I can take a wild guess.
That would
And
be irritating.
to be fair,
if you
if
film
I had
it
to
in and
guess,
sit there, nothing happens.
they may be canceling the regularity with which they do it, but I would be surprised if they never do it again.
Or maybe it's step one for another invasion or something. Who knows? We don't know.
I think you're gonna beat it by Hobo Leaks, Redline.
I
Because
mean,
the current update of Hobo Leaks, which was like 16 hours ago, has event 82, 83, and 84 proving ground filaments being going from non-published to published. That's the most recent update, so I think you're just getting baited.
That's fine.
If you just go pull it up, it's under attributes per type.
Well, the only reason I bring it up is because I do kind of think that they should do these way more often. Like, as far as an acceptable PvP activity is concerned, I think that these Abyssal Proving Grounds are fantastic for it, and I think that if you expanded that system more, you could probably get a shit ton of high seckers to go into that Abyssal Arena and like get their feet wet with PvP, do all this and that. It'd be fantastic. So I hope they don't get rid of it. I see.
But
all right.
but that hasn't happened yet. Why would it happen? What would they have to do to make that happen? Some major changes, right?
They'd have to do some work on their video game.
I think the best way to improve the proving grounds would be to add in like true new bro friendly kind of events where, for example, like you enter and your skills are reduced to that of an alpha when you do it. Like you can't use drugs. Like not neutering a lot of the advantages that new players don't have. So it's a much more competitive environment instead of an environment where who's got every single skill to 5% max. Like I don't know if you guys saw me do it one week, but I had like 400 mil invested in drugs in like every run, like active, so that you have an extra 5 or 10% this, an extra 5 or 10% that, and those.
It clearly made the difference, right?
I don't know if I'd say clearly, but it made a massive fucking difference, right? And that massive difference, is more often than not going to mean the difference between you losing your ship or not. And then all of a sudden, if you're not losing your ship, then it's actually worth it, right? And it's not as fun for the guy who lost.
Sure. And
And
like you said, and a new person might not even know about the drugs.
Well,
Right?
it's funny. I think it was one of the old prophecy proving grounds or something like that. I remember doing it, and I was like getting my ass handed to me like the first 2 or 3 rounds I did. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Why am I losing so bad? And then I realized it was like Amar drugs or something at the time, which increased your laser damage and increased your armor hit points, and it's like, oh, that's why I'm losing these matches. Because the character I do these on is basically perfect skill. So I'm like, why am I doing so much less damage than this guy who I'm facing? I'm not tanking as much. He's just beating me, right? And then obviously I looked and I'm like, oh, of course, there's some drugs involved. And then I went and bought the drugs, and then I was fine for the rest, right?
Well, yeah. I think that your ideas would be good. Yeah, put everybody on the same even field, so everybody could have fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like if they would add in some like abyssal mechanics as well. So like how in the abyssal runs you have like the speed up beacons, and sometimes you have the little flare or flak beacons. Like I think it would be really interesting if they could make the arena interesting as well, like change up the dynamics of it. There's a ton of different ways they could kind of spice it up, and I think those things would be super interesting.
Kind of like the same type of things like the storms give you, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea.
And maybe even alternate them. Like you never know what arena you're gonna get in, or like change up the dynamics a ton,
Kind of
so that
like the Mythic Plus in WoW, where they have different
No, not like
affixes,
WoW.
yeah.
Not like WoW at all.
affixes. No, it is. It's exactly like WoW. They have different affixes. It changes and it's like randomized or whatever. And all they got to do is flip a switch and it turns one of them on and one of them off. But they could definitely do it. But so what Modern Inferno is saying, in Modern Inferno, I saw that you joined the Discord, but you didn't join the Drag Me channel. I wish you would, because I'd like to get your opinion here, since you were one of the people doing them. But I mean, basically, he's saying that everything kind of got gamed out to the point where there was no real need, or there was no need to be competitive. It was unfriendly to newer players because it got so competitive, and then
Yes.
eventually only those people liked it.
Well, that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm saying, right? Like I'm saying this as somebody who did it for. I don't know how many of these events I've done, but I've got the majority, but not all, because I sometimes don't want to play of the skins. Like I've done a lot of these over the years, and like it's lots of fun. I think it's a really good base concept, I guess you might say. Like it's got a ton of potential. It's just like they haven't fully invested the time into doing it a little more refined, and I feel like the filament system is got a couple issues that are problematic too. It could use a little bit of refinement on the edges, and maybe some interesting things in the middle. And obviously, the biggest one to me is that you need a way to equalize skills a little bit. So when people are in the
Zerkik
proving
had a
grounds,
great
their
idea.
skills instantly go max or something like that, like so that new players can enjoy the proving grounds as well, and they're not just auto outcompeted by skill points and drugs and the variety of other things that enable a new player to not be competitive.
Yeah,
And
what Zerkik says in chat. If there was like a buy-in to join, and then you got a preset ship and drugs, whatever you needed, and then if you win, you just get your ISK prize, but you don't keep the ship. Just
yeah,
like spawning it in.
that's a good idea. I'd rather it be more about piloting than just having the ISK for
Oh,
the
100%.
drugs. And yeah, like if it was just piloting, that would be the best part about it. That's the only reason I did that in the first place, was just basic
solo PvP basically, especially in
Yeah,
those FFAs.
and I think we saw, you kind of see it in the FFAs when you have like the really experienced pilots going up against the really experienced pilots. Like it's very clear that this is more often than not a skill matchup because they're both fully maxed on drugs, they're both fully maxed on skills, etc. So
Right.
then it becomes, but those matches are super rare generally because as soon as super max players come up against each other once or twice, like very quick, yeah, and it takes the fun out of it. And at the same point, they're either going to choose to avoid each other or they're not going to queue up in the same way because
Yeah.
usually the ship you're using either hard counters them or they hard counter you, or it's a very awkward kind of scenario. So
Yeah, especially when you were like streaming it too. That was a big part because people would queue up with you and then queue up with counters, especially in like the later time zone like Oz, where it was kind of like a real problem. But that's
yeah,
like my situation was very unique. Like that's a unique situation. But but overall, people had the meta figured out within hours. Like it wasn't even that. I don't know if it was like a Hobo Leaks thing. I always refuse to look at all that. But
I mean, in many cases the meta is super obvious.
well,
Like,
yeah.
it's like God knows how many of those battle cruiser ones where it was just like, well,
Oh yeah, we know.
Cyclone again.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I actually used the same Cyclone for like 3 different ones.
Yeah,
Like
same.
because they only adjusted that. Like I had to take off like a shield boost amper or something for one of them, but like the Cyclone is just so much more god tier than pretty much all the other battle cruisers at the battle cruiser events, and it's just got so much more damage and so much more tank.
Did they ever introduce drug limits at all? Or
Yes, they
no?
did actually. So
Okay.
they changed it so you couldn't use level 4 drugs. You could only use level like 3 drugs or what. Like
Yeah.
they've been paring it down a little, but in my opinion, like it's like if somebody can afford, and as someone who can afford, like yeah, I'm going to use level 3 this, I'm going to use improve this, I'm going to use improve that. Like I'm going to get my full advantage. If I don't get a perfect drug roll, I'll clone swap, re-roll, do it again.
Right.
It doesn't bother me to spend 200 or 300 mil for a single like
One drug.
queue up.
That was the thing. The other thing that kind of bothered me about it was because there was a lot of market stuff that was happening when those abyssals happened, which I think is healthy for the game, but it ruined the actual competitive side of the game. So, like you knew about a week ahead of time what the thing would be, right?
Hmm.
And I remember like I would get in, like I'm a casual player overall. So I would hop on and be like, "Oh, cool, there's a filament thing happening. I'm going to try that. That'd be fun." And then I'd end up spending like 1 or 2 bill just on, 10 or 15 ships, right? It ended up being like so incredibly ridiculous that I just stopped doing it. And that was just on, destroyers and cruisers, like nothing crazy. And it just
Yeah, I
ended up
mean
being
it's
way too much money.
after burner bonus frigates. I better buy up all the rocket launchers and cheetah.
Right.
Like assault frigate matchups. Better buy up all the wolves. Like
Yeah.
whatever.
It's
I
too
think I still have.
obvious.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's very obvious which assault frigate or which this is going to be the strongest and which is going to devolve to, and then that'll become the meta. You just buy a big chunk of them, double the price, put them back up, and there's only so much production in Gita that can be adjusted in the course of a week, or that will want to be. So
Right.
yeah.
Well, that was very annoying to me. It was fun. I still like doing it. Like I like the act of doing the arenas. The issue was all of the other stuff. I wanted to be matched up evenly, but at the end of the day, like I also wanted friends that had never done it before for it to be like within their reach. Be like, hey, try this out. And I couldn't really say that because then they would have to spend hundreds of millions of ISK, and then they would just get curb stomped. Like it was just not a good situation.
Well, and the other issue was always that you would have to basically go to Jita to do it because if you died, you need to be able to reach it basically instantly, and you needed a full market of modules so that you could, fit your ships appropriately. So it always became a situation where people were basically always doing it from either Jita or one of the main market hubs, I guess.
Right.
And that was a problem for me as well, in my opinion, because I feel like people should be able to sit in whatever their combat staging is, be it 1DQ or MJ or whatever, just press a button and filament from there to start. Because otherwise,
Right.
you're putting these other hurdles that players have to go through before they can go enjoy cool content.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's a really good idea. I wish it was more viable.
Yeah.
It's real honestly not something I ever thought of. Especially, like I talked about it a lot for a year, and that conversation never even came up. It's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I much like yourself, I've done a lot of them, and I think it's got a great potential. It's just it needs somebody dev wise to invest into it, and at that point, I think it very much has the possibility of becoming really cool. But will it get that time and investment?
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know.
I doubt it.
My suspicion is no, just because they may not necessarily see the value.
But that's the other thing, though. Like, they have to make it viable for everybody, not just the most hardcore
Yeah,
of
like to be honest, I feel like high end players should be like the least incentivized to do it.
right.
Because traditionally these are the people that I personally like, and I mean no offense to Eve players, but Eve players are scum more often than not, and
Sweaty as fuck.
like I would much rather provide interesting battles for new players than you know tedious fucking min max battles for you know 12-year vets.
For me, yeah.
Well, even then, like you're even the other big thing about bringing people into a game right now is content creation, right? So having like an even playing field is what a lot of the competitive streamers and people like that look for. And Eve is a good platform for that. The problem is CCP has never like fully elaborated on that. Like you see the alliance tournament and everything, but not like from an individual standpoint.
Yeah. No, 100%.
If there was like a persistent 1v1 ladder that like you could actually get a rank on, that would be so sick.
It would be cool, but it would have the same problems as the proving grounds do right now. It would be based on how much ISK you have and how much SP you have. There needs to be like a full like an actual even playing field in order for people to actually be competitive in that.
Well, not if there's a huge buy-in for it. So like being that it's only, 2 people are required minimum for the system to function, you could like you'd have matchmaking, right? So if you're the kind of person
Like an
that's going to
elo.
throw yeah. So if you're the kind of person that's going to throw a lot of ISK into playing in this manner, then your elo is going to skyrocket. And
But that
you are
also requires
going
a ton of
to
people doing it, and I don't think Eve has a player base in order to do
Well,
that.
it doesn't necessarily, right? So you can do kind of like a fallback thing. So you have, your split queues, just like matchmaking in any other competitive video game. If there's not enough people at your level and you wait too long, you will go to a lower level to play. And that's what would happen in this case. But probably 7 or 8 times out of 10, you'd have people that don't want to invest all the money into it not playing against people that do.
But then it would just get boring for the people who are kind of good.
Why? Then it would just be about piloting if it's not about ISK. If you are all spending the same amount of ISK to get into the system.
Well, but if your argument is having matchmaking and having elo, then being better at the game is what your goal is, right?
The goal
Winning is
is
But
to
your
if
show off
you're
goal.
who has the most ISK. Like I can win that battle in this room, I'm sure. And would you guys feel that's an actual achievement? No, it's
no,
not
yeah.
like any something. It's like which nerd can sit at a computer and earn more ISK. That's not a battle that anybody gives a shit about, right?
It's
Like
not,
people
you
are like,
wouldn't earn
who's the
ISK.
best pilot? Who's the what?
It's a ranking system. So like
Right.
it's
So
just
we
1v1s.
agree a ranking system would be fine as long as it is independent of the input in ISK that the players put.
Right.
Because right now the system allows players to input ISK and receive wins effectively.
But
Or
it would
the
not it wouldn't allow players to input ISK and get wins if they are playing only against players that are inputting ISK. Like, that's what I'm saying. It levels the playing field by allowing people to invest in this type of playstyle.
But that's
and
not how the
they-
balance of Eve works.
and
You're
they
not understanding us. So
No,
what we're
I'm
saying
not,
is that
because you're saying that
what we're
it's about
saying
who
is
has
that
the
the
most
ISK to
ISK.
play, the ISK to be competitive currently is in the billions,
Okay.
and that cuts out 95% of the player base.
Okay.
And that is a problem.
Got it.
Because the best players are more often than not fucking cheapskates. Because they rather fly around in their ships and have fun and, like, you know, roam the galaxy than sit in fucking Jita and station trade all day.
I consistently have less than $1 billion in my wallet, and I love solo PvP. Like, the people
So-
who want to do these things are the people that are the most broke in the game.
Can I ask you a question, both of you?
Yep.
Have you never won a fight against a ship that should have beat you? Was more expensive than yours?
Of course, that's one of the best parts of the game. But
So
that's
then why
in a
don't you
single
want
shard
it?
universe,
That's what
not
this
in.
is. If
But
you
I
are
want.
that much better, if you are that much better of a pilot than the people who are spending money to get to the top, then beat them. You'll beat them.
But it doesn't work like that. So if I enter an arena with somebody who has a 15% advantage over me and I lose 9 times out of 10, yeah, that 1 time out of 10 will feel awesome, but I'm still losing 9 times out of 10.
But
And on top of that,
how are you going to lose 9 times out of 10 if these people with the expensive ships can't get up because they lose to people who are better than them? I don't know. It feels like
You're
I'm-
confusing good solo PvP, like with kiting good solo PvP, with arena style PvP. I think your perspective on the matter is not where it needs to be in order
when
to.
two battle cruisers charge at each other, there's very little opportunity for skill expression. When
right,
two
but when
cruisers
it's
charge at each
two
other, or
frigates,
like,
though,
well, the frigates
or
generally
it's
charge at each other too, right? Like,
that's what
you
all
can
the
kite
ships
around
do.
a little and what?
In like an arena setting, that's what a lot of the ships do, is just charge at each other. But
Yes.
you've also got to remember that the point here is to get buy-in from a lot of people, right? So, I mean, having that kind of an elo system would make matchmaking possible, and you would still probably have to come up with some way to curb the ISK cost, I suppose. But
I think we all agree that an elo system would be just fine, would be great. The issue is the playing field has to be even enough that everybody who plays has an equal opportunity to win. If you are trying to say that it should be a billion ISK to play every round, then I just fundamentally disagree with you, and I think that is a terrible opinion.
I think he's just trying to say that, like, good piloting should be able to overcome that, but that's honestly not the way the game is built with drugs and implants. Like, there's
good piloting will get you a little bit of the way, but
yeah.
there's just differences it can't overcome. Like, especially when you start talking like 10% damage differentials, or 10% tank differentials. Like, especially when you have like two ships where it's just not going to like, if one ship does 220 DPS and tanks 220 DPS, and the other ship does 180 and tanks 180, then like there's just no realistic chance for that 180 to win unless he massively outplays the other guy somehow. And
Right.
it's possible, but it's unlikely.
Elo only works when there's some sort of even playing field, SP or otherwise.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
So I think ELO would kind of fix a lot of the stuff though, because so you're saying one guy's doing twice the damage. Well, he's going to grow in the ELO. He's going to go up higher, and then he's going to be facing people who have the skill level and the DPS to fight him. And the person who has the lower DPS is going to be fighting more people at his ELO. It might take him a while to get down there, but he'll be fighting people his skill level.
That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, you'll have the people who are whales fighting each other, and then you'll have the people who are not whales also fighting each other. And it'll hopefully, very rarely be whales fighting not whales. It would take a while to sort itself out, but in my
I don't
mind,
think it quite works like that, unfortunately, just with the way the advantages creep in from money. So you would have people, how do I put this? Unless there is a significant advantage to staying at the top of the elo boards, what people would do is they would just, enjoy some wins, then, effectively throw away some cheap ships and then restart up, right? Much like League of Legends players, what is it, Smurf? No, Smurf.
Yeah, that's what it's called.
Oh, it is okay.
I
Yeah,
think
like
so. Yeah.
you lower your MMR and then you Smurf up or through the ranks, for
Use
fun.
an alt in an Eve's case.
Yeah,
How many alts can you burn through though?
As many as you have.
infinite. It's Eve.
It's not like they're gonna lock it based on your your email thing. Like there's no way they're gonna do that. They want people with more alts to give them more money. There's just no.
Are you saying that would be like a bad thing because people just roll alts and then grind elo?
I think it would make it more complicated for sure. But then you add the spending the ISK side of it, which is implants and drugs. It would require more effort than I think CCP is or ever will be willing to put into a competitive scene for the game.
Do you think a player or a group of players could ever organize something like that? And be kind of like...
Yes, but
they
that would
could,
be...
but the degree of effort to make it work is such an insane factor compared to the degree in which it would cost to program, or the degree of work it would cost to just program in.
I'd like to see somebody try though.
They've definitely done it in other games. I think in Age of Empires 2, it started out with just random people making an ELO system so that people could play their own ELO. And then it got adopted into the main game.
There
after
used to
that.
be a thing called Red versus Blue, which is really close to what you guys are describing. So players have done something similar to that.
Well, no, Red
But not in a complicated game.
Oh no, I think I meant just
comparing FPSs to
fun,
Eve.
Fun fight stuff. Elope? No, I'm not gonna do that. Absolutely not.
But yeah, at its core, I do think that if we had a more even playing field, as opposed to being reliant on ISK and SP and implants and drugs, I think the arena would be a much better place. But yes, it does get, the waters definitely get muddied when you start talking about EVE Online. I'm thinking of it more from a pure like, okay, where does the balance stand now? And if everybody had the same SP and everybody had the same drugs and implant capability, then I think it would be a better thing. But unfortunately, that's not the way EVE is built. So EVE is built on your identity as a player, as well as your SP and how much ISK you have. That's what makes EVE unique from other MMOs. So I think it would be very difficult for CCP to do that in the first place. I think it's cool that they tried, but I'm not sure if it fully works without full, like almost like a fully separate game. That could be why they're not doing it anymore.
Well, we don't know if they're not doing it. It's just it hasn't been done in a while. But I was saying earlier, it's kind of like the market data ESI, like that. They said it was temporarily shut off, and that's been since November. Like it's been months, and it is, for all intents and purposes, gone at this point.
Have they stopped any other endpoints?
Corp History, I think, is still down.
What about live location? Have they ever shut that down?
I don't know.
Because the live location stuff is pretty pervasive to small groups in solo PvP.
Well, that would be like Pathfinder and things like that, right?
I mean, that's where Pathfinder and the wormhole mapper tools are actually a good use case for live location. I don't really have an issue with that. What I do have an issue with is like Intel tools, like Intel map.xyz or near 2 and stuff like that. I think while they are really cool tools and they're developed by very good people.
VSI though. That's just
it does.
Scraping, it's scraping chat
There's
logs.
two ways to do it.
Pulls ESI to get your location.
So yes, so there's two ways to do it. The more modern ones use ESI to get your location, but there's also live chat output, and live chat output also does the same thing. That's what the old Nier did. It used your chat logs and showed where you were based on
You
that.
could make the argument for, well, if they close it will just go back to the fucking chat again. Like nothing
It
changes.
would. They would need to do both. They would need to do both to stop those intel tools. It's not as complicated or black and white as being yes or no for the ESI endpoint. I was just curious about it, if they had even attempted it.
Well, I'll tell you what, team. I have sufficiently run out of things to talk about. And as abrupt as that is, I think that's a good place to call it a night.
Did we talk about Marauders yet?
We're already 5 minutes over. Red light.
Shit.
What about Marauders? Out of curiosity.
Fucking hate them, dude.
Why do you hate Marauders? They're fantastic.
Marauders are fine. Triple XLASP Vargers are not fine.
Okay, but those are Marauders, though, so either they're fine
That
or they're not.
that is the fit that is not fine when it comes to Marauders.
Paladins have been interesting to see over the past year and a half. Or well, seeing them from how they came from in wormholes to how they scaled into nullsec, which I think is interesting. Because paladins are the most scalable tool as far as Marauders go, or battleships in general. It's just been interesting to see. I still fucking hate them though. They're Marauders.
I mean, I know
Marauders.
Next week.
Anyways, so I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna start a raid. Send it over to Ghosty Gaming. Looks like he's streaming some. He's appears to be in some sort of a Pontifex. What's the T1?
Ghosty's a good guy too. He's a good.
What's the T1 Amar destroyer?
Dragoon.
A Dragoon.
Catalyst?
I think.
Oh,
in...
Courser.
Dragoon or Courser?
Well, he said it looked like a Pontifex, so I assume he's talking about the Dragoon.
It's
you never know with Redline.
It's got an AB on it, 2 newts, missiles.
It's a Dragoon.
A reactive armor hardener.
Sounds like a Dragoon.
Armor plates. Now see that. Would a Dragoon have armor plates on it?
Yes. It's an armor ship.
It's a drumboat.
Alright. So that's... Alright. Well, anyways, we're going to go and we're going to watch his stream for a little while. It's been a pleasure hosting you guys this evening. Thanks everybody for coming on the show. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks,
And
Redline.
we'll probably see you next week unless if it's above 75 degrees, I will not be here.
Unless we talk about it and you give me the keys to do it.
Because you'll be outside?
Exactly. I will be touching grass. Dominarch will have the keys to the castle while I'm gone. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Have a great night.
Yeah. All right. Good night, guys.
Thanks, man.
I gotta bounce.
See you, brother. Have a good one.
Yep. You guys too. Later.